Sometimes a woman is not crying over the person who left. Sometimes she is crying over the woman she had to become while trying to keep them. The woman who learned to speak carefully so she would not be misunderstood. The woman who swallowed questions because asking them always seemed to start another argument. The woman who checked her phone, then pretended she had not been waiting. The woman who kept smiling at work, kept feeding children, kept paying bills, kept answering messages, kept showing up for everybody else while something inside her was quietly breaking. And no one saw how much strength it took just to act normal. There is a kind of heartbreak that does not announce itself loudly. It does not always throw plates. It does not always collapse on the floor. Sometimes it folds laundry. Sometimes it drives home in silence. Sometimes it sits in the parking lot a little longer because going inside means facing the quiet again. And before this message is over, I want you to understand something deeply. Your pain did not last so long because you were weak. It lasted because what happened did not only hurt your heart, it touched your trust, it touched your identity, it touched your body. It touched the future you were quietly building. It touched the part of you that believed loyalty would be honored if you just loved long enough. Pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again. But first, it must stop pretending it was not crushed. There is dignity in telling the truth, not the dramatic truth, not the bitter truth, not the version of the story you tell so people will take your side. The quiet truth. The truth that says, I love someone who made me feel alone while I was still beside them. The truth that says, I kept giving chances because I did not want my years to mean nothing. The truth that says, I missed someone who hurt me, and that made me feel ashamed. The truth that says, I knew something was wrong, but I kept hoping love would become evidence. And that is where many women begin to suffer in silence. Not because they do not know pain, but because they are embarrassed by how much they endured before finally admitting it was pain. But here is the part many women are never told. You can be intelligent and still get attached to someone inconsistent. You can be strong and still crave a message from someone who disappointed you. You can have standards and still struggle to leave when your heart has been trained to wait for small pieces of affection. You can know the truth and still grieve the illusion. That does not make you foolish. It makes you human. Emotional inconsistency can become its own kind of cage. One day there is warmth. The next day there is distance. One moment they speak as if you matter. The next moment you are left reading silence like it is a language. And because the affection returns sometimes, your mind begins searching for a pattern. You start asking yourself, what did I do differently when they were kind? What did I say before they pulled away? Was I too much? Was I not enough? Did I ask too soon? Did I love too loudly? Did I become hard to love? And slowly, without realizing it, you stop asking whether they were capable of loving you well. You begin investigating yourself like you are the crime scene. Soft pulse. Ask yourself this gently. Were you loved or were you managed? Were you chosen or were you kept close enough to be useful? Were you cherished or were you given just enough tenderness to keep you from leaving? That question may hurt, but sometimes a question that hurts is the beginning of freedom, because there is a difference between love and emotional starvation. Love does not leave you constantly guessing whether you matter. Love does not make you feel guilty for needing consistency. Love does not require you to become smaller just to remain in the room. Love does not turn your tenderness into a place where someone comes to rest but never learns to stay. And yet, when a woman has given years of herself, she does not simply walk away from a person. She walks away from an entire imagined life. She grieves the kitchen mornings that never happened, the home she thought would feel safe, the future conversations, the family peace, the birthdays, the ordinary routines, the version of herself who believed one day this will all make sense. That is why the pain feels larger than the relationship. You are not only grieving him, you may be grieving the woman who waited, the woman who explained too much, the woman who softened every disappointment, the woman who protected someone's image while they were damaging her spirit, the woman who kept setting a table for a love that had stopped arriving long ago. And when you finally see that clearly, grief can feel like humiliation. You may ask, how did I not know? How did I let it go this far? How did I become someone who begged for basic kindness? How did I confuse crumbs for care? But listen closely. Shame is not the same as truth. Shame says, I was stupid. Truth says, I was hoping. Shame says, I wasted my life. Truth says, I invested love where accountability was missing. Shame says, I should have known better. Truth says, I knew what I knew when I was strong enough to know it. There is mercy in understanding your own timeline. You did not stay because you had no worth. You may have stayed because you believed in repair, because you were loyal, because you had children to think about, because leaving would have torn apart more than a relationship, because you were taught to be patient, because you were afraid of starting over. Because every time you almost accepted the truth, they gave you just enough tenderness to make you doubt your own pain. And this is where the wound becomes confusing. Because sometimes the person who hurt you was not cruel every day. Sometimes they laughed with you. Sometimes they held you. Sometimes they said the right thing. Sometimes they made you believe the good version was the real version. And the cold version was only stress, fear, timing, trauma, pressure, misunderstanding. So you waited for the good version to return. You kept holding the key to a house someone had already emptied. Pausa. That kind of waiting can exhaust the soul. Not all at once. Slowly. It shows up in your body first. Tight chest. Heavy mornings. Anxiety before checking your phone. A stomach that knows disappointment before your mind admits it. A tiredness sleep cannot fix. Then it reaches your mind. You replay conversations. You search old messages. You examine tone. You remember the beginning and wonder where everything changed. You try to solve a silence that was never your responsibility to explain. And then it reaches your spirit. You stop trusting your own sense of reality. You begin asking, am I asking too much? You begin apologizing for needs that are normal. You begin accepting confusion because clarity would require a decision. One painful but clarifying truth is this. When someone refuses to be honest with you, your mind may keep working overtime trying to create closure out of missing information. That is why silence hurts so much. Silence does not simply leave you alone. It leaves you unfinished. It gives your heart no place to put the pain, no sentence to end the chapter, no clean reason, no respectful goodbye, no acknowledgement that what happened mattered. So your mind keeps returning to the same room, looking for the answer under every chair. But some rooms were never empty because you failed to search well. Some rooms were empty because the other person removed the truth and left you with echoes. And still, somehow, you may miss them. That is one of the hardest parts to admit. You may miss the voice, the routine, the small moments, the version of them that appeared on good days, the comfort you felt before the confusion became too loud, the dream you built around them before reality began to interrupt. Missing someone who hurt you does not mean you should go back. It means your heart is grieving attachment, memory, habit, hope, and loss all at once. Be gentle with that. Do not use your longing as proof that they were right for you. Longing is not always wisdom. Sometimes longing is the nervous system reaching for the familiar, even when the familiar was painful. Sometimes the body would rather return to a known ache than stand trembling before an unknown peace. Let this breathe. A heart that has been hurt does not blossom again because someone tells it to be strong. It blossoms when it is finally allowed to tell the whole truth. Not only they hurt me, but also I hurt myself by staying silent when I needed to speak. Not only they abandoned me, but also I abandoned parts of myself trying to be easy to keep. Not only they did not choose me, but also I kept trying to be chosen by someone who benefited from my waiting. This is not blame. This is return. There is a holy kind of honesty that does not condemn you. It gathers you. It says, come back here. Come back to your own body. Come back to your own knowing. Come back to the woman who does not have to audition for tenderness. Because you were never meant to survive on emotional scraps and call it devotion. You were never meant to make a home inside uncertainty. You were never meant to keep watering a garden where someone else kept pulling up the roots. And perhaps the first blossom after heartbreak is not joy. Perhaps it is clarity. Quiet clarity. The kind that does not need to shout. The kind that does not need revenge. The kind that simply says, I can love deeply and still stop standing where I am being diminished. That is where dignity begins. Not in pretending you are over it. Not in acting cold. Not in proving you do not care. Dignity begins when reality becomes more sacred than longing. When you stop negotiating with what already broke you. When you stop asking the wrong person to validate your pain. When you finally understand that being unchosen by one person does not erase the value of what you gave. A woman does not become less worthy because someone consumed her love carelessly. She becomes more awake. An awakening can hurt before it heals. Because now you must grieve with open eyes. You must see the empty places without decorating them. You must name the silence without translating it into hope. You must admit that affection is not the same as commitment. You must accept that someone can enjoy your love and still not have the maturity to honor it. That truth is heavy, but it is clean. And clean pain is different from confusing pain. Confusing pain keeps you circling. Clean pain begins to lead you home. So tonight, or whenever this message finds you, do not rush yourself into strength. Sit with this gently. Maybe you are not broken beyond repair. Maybe you are in the season where your heart is learning the difference between being wanted in moments and being valued in truth. Maybe the blossom begins there, not with a grand announcement, but with one quiet decision. I will stop calling abandonment a misunderstanding. I will stop calling inconsistency love. I will stop shrinking my needs so someone else can remain comfortable. I will stop treating my heart like it has to earn a place at a table where love should have already made room. Soft pause. And in the next part, we need to talk about why healing can feel so slow, even when you know the truth, why your mind still returns, why your body still aches, why your heart still reaches for what hurt it, and why none of that means you are failing. Knowing the truth does not mean the heart immediately stops reaching. Sometimes you can understand what happened and still feel your body ache for the person who caused the wound. You can tell yourself, I know better now, and still wake up with their name moving through your mind before the day has even begun. You can block the number, delete the thread, put the photographs away, and still feel something inside you listening for footsteps that may never come back. And this is where many women become cruel to themselves. They say, why am I still thinking about this? Why do I still care? Why can't I just be done? Why does a part of me still miss someone who made me feel so alone? But healing is not the same thing as flipping a switch A wounded heart does not become free simply because the mind has gathered enough evidence. Sometimes the mind knows the door is closed long before the nervous system stops standing beside it. Pause. There is something important you need to hear before you blame yourself one more time. The part of you that still misses them may not be foolish. It may simply be wounded. It may be attached to the version of them that appeared just often enough to keep hope alive. It may be grieving the apology that never came. It may be trying to understand why someone could accept your devotion but refuse to protect your heart. It may be searching for the moment when love turned into waiting and waiting turned into self-erasure. That kind of pain does not leave quickly because it was not only emotional, it became physical. It lived in your chest. It changed your sleep. It tightened your shoulders. It made your stomach turn when the phone stayed silent. It taught your body to prepare for disappointment before disappointment even arrived. When love becomes uncertain, the body becomes alert. You may not call it fear. You may call it intuition. You may call it overthinking. You may call it being sensitive. You may call it, I just have a bad feeling. But often it is your nervous system trying to survive inconsistency. And inconsistency can be more confusing than a clean ending. A clean ending hurts, but it gives the heart a wall to stop against. Inconsistency keeps opening a window. One day there is tenderness. The next day there is distance. One day they speak of a future. The next day they act like your needs are a burden. One day you feel chosen. The next day you feel like you are standing outside your own life, knocking on a door that should have opened without begging. That back and forth can become emotionally addictive. Not because you wanted drama, but because every small return felt like relief. Every message after silence felt like oxygen. Every apology, even an incomplete one, felt like maybe the story could still be saved. Every soft moment became proof your hope was not foolish. Every little sign of affection made you question the pain you had been trying so hard to name. And this is where the wound becomes deeper. Because you did not only become attached to the person, you became attached to the possibility. The possibility that one day they would understand. The possibility that one day they would arrive fully. The possibility that one day all the waiting, forgiving, explaining, and enduring would finally be rewarded with the love you believed was hidden underneath their confusion. But sometimes what we call potential is only pain with beautiful lighting. Soft pause. Ask yourself gently, were you in love with what was happening or with what you kept hoping would finally happen? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to bring you back to reality. Because reality, even when it hurts, is kinder than illusion. Illusion asks you to keep paying for a future no one is building with you. Reality asks you to stop spending your life on promises that never became behavior. Illusion says, maybe this time will be different. Reality says, look at the pattern, not the apology. And for a grown woman, this is especially painful because by the time you reach a certain age, love is no longer just about romance. It is about peace. It is about time. It is about the home you thought you were creating, the family rhythms, the years you cannot get back, the energy you gave when you were already tired, the patience you offered while carrying responsibilities no one else could see. You were not just hoping for flowers and sweet words. You were hoping for steadiness. You were hoping for a place where your nervous system could finally rest. You were hoping to stop being the strong one all the time. So when that love failed you, it did not feel like a simple heartbreak. It felt like a collapse of the life you had been quietly preparing for. You may have looked around one day and realized you were still standing, still functioning, still answering emails, still taking care of children, still remembering appointments, still showing up for family, still being polite in public. But inside, there was a room no one entered. A room full of old conversations. A room full of unanswered questions. A room full of moments you replayed because something in you needed the story to make sense. And perhaps the hardest part was this. The world kept moving. Nobody paused the bills. Nobody paused the laundry. Nobody paused your work. Nobody paused the needs of the people who depended on you. Nobody paused aging, responsibilities, family expectations, or the quiet pressure to appear well. So you carried heartbreak like a second body. You carried it while smiling. You carried it while cooking. You carried it while making plans. You carried it while pretending you were simply tired. You carried it into the shower, into the car, into the middle of ordinary afternoons when one memory could suddenly pull the breath out of you. That is not weakness. That is a woman surviving without making her pain everyone else's burden. But let this be said with tenderness and truth. Just because you survive silently does not mean silence should become your home. There comes a time when the heart must be allowed to tell the truth, even if the voice trembles. Not to beg, not to accuse, not to reopen the door, but to release the lie that you were unaffected because you were affected deeply. You were affected by every time you had to ask for what should have been freely given. You were affected by every silence that made you feel disposable. You were affected by every half answer that left your mind working through the night. You were affected by every moment you made yourself smaller so someone else would not feel confronted by your pain. A heart cannot blossom while it is still pretending the winter did not happen. Pause. And no, this does not mean you must hate them. Hatred is not healing. Bitterness is not proof of strength. You do not need to become cold in order to become free. You can tell the truth without poisoning your spirit. You can release someone without denying that you love them. You can admit they hurt you without building your whole identity around the wound. You can stop protecting their image without becoming cruel. That is emotional dignity. It is not softness without boundaries. It is not forgiveness without wisdom. It is not silence without self-respect. It is the calm inner authority that says, I will no longer abandon myself in order to keep peace with someone who kept disturbing mine. There is a difference between being loving and being endlessly available for pain. There's a difference between patience and participation in your own diminishment. There is a difference between grace and pretending harm did not happen. Many women learn this late because they were taught to be understanding before they were taught to be honest with themselves. They were praised for being easy, praised for being loyal, praised for forgiving, praised for holding everything together, praised for not making a scene, praised for staying when leaving would have looked selfish to people who never had to live inside the relationship. But a woman can be kind and still have a limit. A woman can be spiritual and still require respect. A woman can love deeply and still say, this is no longer a place where I can remain whole. That is not bitterness. That is discernment. Soft pause. Sometimes self-respect begins as grief. It does not always feel powerful at first. It may feel like crying after you finally stop reaching out. It may feel like trembling while you refuse to explain yourself one more time. It may feel like loneliness after removing yourself from a familiar pattern. It may feel like silence so wide, you wonder if you made the right choice. But do not confuse grief with failure. When you stop returning to what hurt you, the first thing you may feel is not freedom. It may be withdrawal. Because your heart had become accustomed to the cycle. The waiting, the hoping, the disappointment, the small return, the relief, the doubt, the new wound, And when that cycle ends, even peace may feel strange at first. Peace may feel empty because chaos used to fill the room. Peace may feel lonely because anxiety used to keep you company. Peace may feel unfamiliar because you spent so long trying to earn love that rest now feels suspicious. But give yourself time. A garden does not bloom the moment the storm passes. First, the soil must settle. First, the broken stems must be seen. First, the roots must remember they are still alive. First, the sun must touch places that have been covered for too long. So when you feel slow, do not call yourself stuck too quickly. You may be stabilizing. You may be learning how to live without emotional emergency. You may be teaching your body that love does not have to feel like waiting for bad news. You may be discovering that calm is not boredom, it is safety. And safety may feel unfamiliar to a woman who has spent years confusing intensity with intimacy. Let this breathe for a moment. Pausa. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but it may not blossom in the way you expect it. It may not begin with excitement. It may begin with sleeping through the night. It may begin with eating without a tight stomach. It may begin with laughing once and realizing the laugh was real. It may begin with not checking the phone. It may begin with telling one trusted person the truth. It may begin with admitting, I miss them, but I do not miss how I felt with them. That sentence alone can become a doorway because sometimes healing is not choosing between love and truth. It is finally allowing truth to protect the love you still have for yourself. You can honor what you felt without returning to what harmed you. You can be grateful for the lessons without romanticizing the damage. You can admit the beautiful moments existed without pretending they were enough to make the relationship safe. This is maturity. Not denying the good, not ignoring the bad, not making the whole story simple just so you can stop feeling conflicted. A grown woman can hold complexity. She can say, there were moments when I felt loved. And she can also say, there were patterns that made me feel abandoned. Both can be true. And when both are true, you do not have to betray yourself by choosing only the softer memory. You are allowed to remember accurately. There is dignity in accurate memory, because inaccurate memory is one of the ways longing tries to pull you back. It edits the story. It shows you the tender scenes and hides the nights you cried alone. It shows you the apology and hides the repetition. It shows you the warmth and hides the waiting. It shows you the promise and hides the pattern. So when you miss them, do not attack yourself, but do not let longing become your historian. Let truth speak too. Let the whole story enter the room. Ask yourself, when I miss them, what exactly am I missing? Am I missing the person? Or am I missing being held? Am I missing love? Or am I missing the hope that one day I would finally be safe with them? Am I missing the relationship? Or am I missing the woman I was before I became tired? These questions are gentle tools. They do not cut you. They free you. Because once you understand what you are truly grieving, you can begin to care for the right wound. If you are grieving lost time, you need compassion, not shame. If you are grieving betrayal, you need truth, not denial. If you are grieving silence, you need expression, not more waiting. If you are grieving the future, you need permission to mourn what never fully arrived. If you are grieving yourself, you need to come back slowly, tenderly, without punishment. Soft pause. Coming back to yourself may look very ordinary at first. It may look like cleaning one corner of your room, changing the sheets, taking a walk without rehearsing an old conversation, drinking water because your body has carried enough stress, writing down what happened without making excuses for anyone, letting yourself say, that hurt me, without immediately adding, but they were going through a lot. It may look like no longer explaining your pain to someone committed to misunderstanding it. It may look like refusing to chase closure from the person who benefited from your confusion. It may look like making one small decision that proves you are no longer willing to be a stranger to yourself. That is how the blossom begins. Small, quiet, almost invisible, but real. A woman does not return to herself in one dramatic moment. She returns in pieces, one honest sentence at a time, one boundary at a time, one night of not reaching out, one morning of choosing peace over the old hunger, one moment of remembering that her life is not over because someone failed to love her carefully. And maybe this is where your heart begins to understand you were not too much. You were asking the wrong place to have room for you. You were not hard to love. You were trying to be nourished by someone who did not know how to stay emotionally present. You were not weak for hoping. You were wounded by inconsistency, and inconsistency trains the heart to wait for rescue from the same place that caused the ache. But now, slowly, something in you is learning a new language. Not the language of begging, not the language of proving, not the language of pretending everything is fine, the language of return. I am here. I matter. I can tell the truth. I can grieve and still grow. I can be tender and still protected. I can miss what hurt me without walking back into it. I can blossom again, not because the past was small, but because my life is still sacred. Hold that close, because in the next part, we need to go deeper into the self-blame, the private shame many women carry after staying too long, forgiving too much, and loving someone who kept disappearing. And we will speak to that shame with truth, not to condemn you, but to finally set you down gently from the weight you were never meant to carry. There is a private shame many women carry after they have been hurt. It is not only the shame of being betrayed, it is the shame of having stayed. The shame of remembering how many times you forgave, how many times you explained, how many times you believed the same apology in a different tone, how many times you lowered your voice, softened your needs, gave them another chance, and told yourself, maybe this time they finally understand. And when the relationship becomes too painful to deny, shame begins whispering cruel things. You should have left sooner. You should have known better. You looked desperate. You gave too much. You let them make a fool of you. You wasted your years. But shame is a poor storyteller. It tells the story without tenderness. It leaves out your hope. It leaves out your loyalty. It leaves out the nights you were confused, not careless. It leaves out the fact that you were trying to save something you believed was sacred. Pause. Let this meet you gently. You did not stay because you had no dignity. You may have stayed because you were trying to give love every honest chance before letting go. You may have stayed because there were children, memories, family ties, shared rooms, shared bills, shared dreams, and years woven together in ways outsiders could not understand. You may have stayed because the person who hurt you was not always hurting you. And that is one reason the wound became so complicated. If they had been cruel every day, perhaps leaving would have felt clearer. If there had been no tenderness, no laughter, no moments of warmth, no memory of being held, perhaps your heart would have understood sooner. But pain becomes confusing when it is mixed with affection. A cold silence after a sweet promise, a soft touch after emotional distance, a kind message after days of neglect, a little hope after a deep humiliation. That kind of inconsistency does not only break trust, it blurs reality. And when reality is blurred, a woman may keep trying to love her way back into clarity. She may think, if I explain it better, they will understand. If I become calmer, they will listen. If I stop asking so much, they will come closer. If I love them more carefully, they will stop leaving emotionally. But here is the deeper truth. You cannot become peaceful enough to make someone honest. You cannot become patient enough to make someone accountable. You cannot become beautiful, loyal, quiet, forgiving, or useful enough to make an unavailable person emotionally present. And that does not mean you were lacking. It means you were trying to do the work of two souls with one exhausted heart. Soft pause. Ask yourself with compassion. Did you stay because you were blind, or because every time you tried to see clearly, hope covered your eyes? Hope can be beautiful, but hope without reality can become a gentle prison. It can keep you standing beside a closed door, calling it faith. It can keep you watering a garden where the roots have already been injured. It can make you mistake waiting for devotion. It can make you call emotional hunger love. And for women who have carried abandonment wounds before, this can reach even deeper. Sometimes being unchosen by one person awakens every earlier place where you felt unseen, replaceable, or not enough. It may touch the child in you who had to earn affection, the young woman who learned to be useful before she felt lovable, the wife or partner who kept peace by swallowing hurt, the mother who held everyone else together while privately falling apart, the woman who became dependable because being needy once felt dangerous. So when someone inconsistent enters your life, the pain may feel bigger than the present. It may feel ancient, not because you are dramatic, not because you are too sensitive, but because the present wound found an old bruise. And suddenly, their silence does not feel like one person failing to respond. It feels like proof. Proof that you are easy to leave. Proof that your needs are too much. Proof that love disappears when you ask for clarity. Proof that you must earn a place in someone's heart by being endlessly understanding. But pain is not always proof. Sometimes pain is memory. Sometimes your nervous system is reacting not only to what happened, but to everything this moment resembles. That is why healing requires more than telling yourself, they were wrong for me. Healing asks, what did this relationship make me believe about myself? Did it make you believe you had to perform calmness to deserve affection? Did it make you believe your questions were accusations? Did it make you believe your intuition was insecurity? Did it make you believe love is something you receive only after enduring confusion? Did it make you believe your tenderness was valuable only when it required nothing in return? These are not small questions. They are doorways back to yourself. Because betrayal does not only make a woman ask, can I trust them? It makes her ask quietly, painfully, can I trust myself? Can I trust what I felt? Can I trust what I noticed? Can I trust the unease in my body? Can I trust the part of me that knew something was wrong before I could prove it? Can I trust myself after I ignored myself for so long? That is the wound underneath many wounds. Not only that someone broke your trust, but that somewhere along the way you began to break trust with yourself in order to preserve the relationship. Pausa. And now, self-trust must be rebuilt slowly, not with punishment, not with harsh rules, not with becoming suspicious of everyone. Self-trust is rebuilt through small acts of honesty. When something hurts, you stop calling it nothing. When someone disappears, you stop inventing noble reasons for their absence. When your body tightens, you listen. When your spirit feels uneasy, you do not silence it just because the truth would require courage. When a pattern repeats, you honor the pattern more than the promise. That is how a woman begins to return. Not by becoming hard, by becoming honest. There is a difference. A hard woman says, no one will ever reach me again. An honest woman says, the next person who reaches me must meet me with truth. A hard woman builds walls from pain. An honest woman builds boundaries from wisdom. A hard woman denies her tenderness. An honest woman protects it. And you, dear woman, do not need to lose your softness in order to survive what happened. Your tenderness was never the problem. The problem was offering tenderness where there was no reverence for it. The problem was giving your deepest loyalty to someone who treated consistency like an option. The problem was trying to bloom in soil that kept being disturbed. A flower does not become foolish because it tried to grow, but it does need the right ground. Soft pause. Maybe you are beginning to understand that now. Maybe there was nothing wrong with the love you had to give. Maybe the sorrow is that you gave it to someone who could receive warmth without offering shelter. Someone who could enjoy your care without becoming careful with you. Someone who could accept your forgiveness without doing the work that forgiveness deserved. And that realization can bring grief. Because when you stop blaming yourself, you may finally have to feel how unfair it was. You may finally feel the anger you kept covering with understanding. The anger from being taken for granted. The anger from being left in uncertainty. The anger from giving your best years to someone who kept giving you reasons to doubt yourself. The anger from being patient with someone who used your patience as a place to hide. Anger is not always bitterness. Sometimes anger is the part of you that still knows you deserve better. Do not be afraid of it. Do not let it drive your life, but do not silence it too quickly. Anger can become a messenger. It can say, that mattered. That crossed a line. That should not have been normalized. That was not love simply because you survived it. A woman healing with dignity does not worship anger, but she lets it tell the truth before she lays it down. Because some women were taught to forgive so quickly that they never learned how to name the wound. And unnamed wounds do not disappear. They hide in the body. They become fatigue. They become resentment. They become anxiety. They become numbness. They become overthinking. They become the quiet habit of expecting disappointment before joy has a chance to arrive. So let the truth have language. Say it, even if only to yourself. I was hurt by the silence. I was harmed by the inconsistency. I was exhausted by having to interpret love instead of receiving it clearly. I was lonely in a connection that was supposed to comfort me. I stayed longer than I wish I had, but I will not use that against myself anymore. That last sentence matters. I will not use that against myself anymore, because the person who hurt you may already have taken enough. Do not let shame take the rest. Pause. Shame wants to keep you bent over the past. Dignity asks you to stand inside the truth without beating yourself for what you did not know how to leave. You are allowed to regret without self-hatred. You are allowed to mourn without calling yourself foolish. You are allowed to admit, I stayed too long, without turning your whole life into a courtroom where you are always the accused. There is a more merciful way to understand yourself. You can say, I stayed because I loved. I stayed because I hoped. I stayed because I was afraid. I stayed because I did not yet know how to choose peace over familiarity. I stayed because leaving would have forced me to grieve many things at once. I stayed because a part of me still believed that if I became easier to love, the love would become safer. And then you can add, but now I know, not with cruelty, with clarity. Now I know that love without consistency creates confusion. Now I know that silence can be a form of emotional harm. Now I know that my needs were not too much simply because someone avoided them. Now I know that being chosen in private moments is not the same as being honored in real life. Now I know that I cannot build a future on someone's occasional tenderness. This is not failure. This is wisdom arriving through grief. And yes, it may have cost you years, energy, sleep, confidence, peace. Parts of yourself you are now trying to recover. But do not say your life is ruined. Something can be deeply wounded and still not be finished. A tree can lose branches and still carry spring inside its roots. A woman can lose years and still reclaim the life that remains. A heart can be hurt and still blossom again. But not by denying the wound, by learning what the wound came to teach without letting it define the rest of her life. Let this breathe. One practical step begins here. Stop asking, why wasn't I enough? Start asking, what did I abandon in myself while trying to become enough for someone else? That question changes the direction of healing, because why wasn't I enough keeps your attention on their inability to choose you. But what did I abandon in myself? Brings your attention back home. Did you abandon your voice, your standards, your friendships, your rest, your body, your joy, your sense of timing, your spiritual quiet, your honest anger, your dreams outside of them? This is not to blame you. It is to help you gather what was scattered. On. You may not recover everything overnight, but you can begin. You can return to the friend you stopped calling because you were embarrassed. You can return to the hobby that made you feel alive before love became survival. You can return to your body with gentleness instead of treating it like a machine that must keep functioning. You can return to prayer, stillness, journaling, walking, music, silence, or whatever helps your inner life become audible again. You can return to mornings that are not organized around whether someone chooses to speak. You can return to evenings that do not end with you rereading old messages, looking for proof that the love was real. And yes, the love may have been real on your side. That is not the question anymore. The question is whether it was safe, whether it was mutual, whether it was honest, whether it allowed you to remain whole, whether it gave back to the woman who kept giving, because love is not proven only by feeling. Love must also be carried by behavior. And when behavior keeps wounding you, your heart is allowed to respect the evidence. Soft pause. There is a tenderness in you that may still want to defend them. You may still say, they had a hard life. They did not know how to communicate. They were wounded too. They were afraid. They had pressure. They did not mean to hurt me. Maybe some of that is true, but another person's wound does not give them ownership of your peace. Their pain may explain certain things. It does not excuse the cost to your spirit. You can have compassion for their brokenness without volunteering your heart as the place where they refuse to heal. Read that slowly inside yourself. I can have compassion for their brokenness without volunteering my heart as the place where they refuse to heal. That is not cruelty. That is mercy with a boundary. And mercy without boundaries can become self-neglect. Many women confuse being loving with being endlessly absorbent. Absorbing moods, absorbing silence, absorbing blame, absorbing distance, absorbing inconsistency, absorbing someone else's refusal to grow. But you were not created to be a cushion for someone's immaturity. You are a woman with a soul, with limits, with history, with dreams, with a body that keeps score when your mouth keeps saying, I'm fine. And if your body has been tired, perhaps it is not betraying you. Perhaps it is telling the truth you kept postponing. Fatigue can be a messenger. Anxiety can be a messenger. Tightness can be a messenger. Numbness can be a messenger. Even your tears can be messengers. They are not evidence that you are weak. They are evidence that something in you is asking to be heard after being quiet for too long. Pause. So let us speak to the woman inside you who feels ashamed. The woman who thinks she should have been smarter. The woman who cannot believe she gave so much. The woman who feels embarrassed that she waited. The woman who loved deeply and now looks back with a trembling kind of disbelief. Come closer to her. Do not insult her. Do not call her foolish. She was trying to protect a dream. She was trying to save a bond. She was trying to believe in the best of someone. She was trying to make love strong enough to survive what was missing. She may have been wrong about the relationship, but she was not wrong for having a heart. She was not wrong for wanting consistency. She was not wrong for needing reassurance. She was not wrong for desiring a love that felt like home instead of a hallway where she kept waiting to be invited in. She was not wrong for wanting to be chosen without begging. And now she needs your compassion more than your criticism, because she is the same woman who will carry you forward. Not the perfect woman, not the untouched woman, not the woman who never made mistakes. The real woman, the one who has cried and still risen, the one who has been humiliated and still kept her grace, the one who has been disappointed and still refuses to become cruel, the one who is learning that healing is not becoming who she was before the pain. Healing is becoming someone who will no longer abandon herself in order to be loved. That is the blossom. Not a pretty, effortless thing. A brave thing. A root pushing through hard ground. A quiet green life returning after a season that looked barren. A woman standing in the mirror, not fully healed, not fully certain, but finally willing to say, I am not going to punish myself for the love I gave. I am going to learn from it. I am going to grieve it honestly. And I am going to come back to myself with more mercy than shame. Hold that sentence close. Because in the next part, we will talk about closure, why you may still be waiting for an apology, an explanation, a confession, or one final conversation, and why your freedom may begin when you stop asking the person who wounded you to be the one who proves your wound was real. Sometimes the hardest part is not accepting that someone hurt you. Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that they may never explain it in a way that honors what it cost you. They may never sit across from you with humility in their eyes and say, I understand now. They may never name the nights you cried. They may never admit how much confusion they created. They may never confess that your patience became convenient for them. They may never speak the sentence your heart has been waiting for. I should have treated you better. And because that sentence never comes, a part of you remains standing at the edge of the story, unable to leave. Not because you still want to suffer, but because the wound feels unfinished. Pause. There is a kind of grief that becomes trapped when no one acknowledges what happened. You are left holding memories that feel heavy in your hands, while the other person walks around as if nothing serious occurred. And that can make you question yourself. Was it really that bad? Did I exaggerate? Did I misunderstand? Was I too emotional? Did I make pain out of something ordinary? But listen carefully. A wound does not need permission from the person who caused it in order to be real. Your pain does not become valid only when they finally admit they hurt you. Your sleepless nights were real. Your anxiety was real. Your confusion was real. Your loneliness inside the connection was real. Your body tightening at their silence was real. Your quiet hope collapsing again and again was real. And perhaps one of the deepest wounds is not just what they did. It is the way they left you alone with the meaning of it. That is why you may still want one more conversation. Not because you want drama, not because you want to beg, not because you are weak, but because something inside you wants the story to become decent. You want the ending to have dignity. You want the person you loved to show enough maturity to look at the damage honestly. You want proof that you did not imagine the bond. You want proof that the years mattered. You want proof that your love was not simply used and then discarded into silence. That desire is human. But here is the painful truth many women meet slowly. Some people cannot give closure because closure requires honesty. And honesty would require them to meet the version of themselves they have been avoiding. Soft pose. Not everyone who hurt you is capable of becoming a witness to your pain. Some people will minimize because the full truth would expose them. Some people will stay silent because silence protects their image. Some people will blame you because accountability feels too heavy in their hands. Some people will offer a small apology with no changed behavior because they want relief from guilt, not repair. Some people will keep things vague because confusion allows them to remain innocent in their own mind. And if you keep waiting for clarity from someone who benefits from fog, you may spend years begging a locked door to become a window. There is dignity in no longer asking confusion to become confession. There is dignity in saying, even if they never say it, I know what happened to me. Not with arrogance, not with bitterness, with grounded certainty. Because closure is often misunderstood. Many people think closure is a final conversation, a calm explanation, a neat apology, a clean ending where both people understand the truth and leave with respect. Sometimes that happens. And when it does, it can be a mercy. But many women never receive that kind of ending. They receive distance, deflection, a message that says everything and nothing, a silence that makes them feel foolish for caring, a half apology that somehow turns into another injury, a conversation where they leave feeling more confused than before. And then they wonder why they cannot move on. But maybe the problem is not that you lack strength. Maybe the problem is that you keep looking for healing in the place where the harm was repeated. Pause. Ask yourself gently, am I seeking closure or am I seeking validation from the person who made me doubt myself? That question can open a locked room inside you. Because sometimes what you call closure is really the desire to hear them say, you were not crazy. You were not too sensitive. You were not imagining the distance. You were not wrong for needing more. You were not asking too much. You were not difficult to love. You were hurt because I was careless with something sacred. And perhaps you deserve to hear that. But you may not need to hear it from them in order to begin living again. There comes a moment when a woman must stop making her freedom dependent on the emotional maturity of the person who wounded her. That moment is not easy. It may feel unfair because it is unfair. It is unfair to be hurt and then become responsible for your own healing. It is unfair to be confused and then have to create clarity alone. It is unfair to give loyalty and receive silence. It is unfair to be left with the emotional cleanup after someone else made the mess. But healing does not always begin in fairness. Sometimes healing begins in refusal, a quiet refusal. I refuse to keep reopening my wound at the feet of someone who will not acknowledge the blood. I refuse to keep explaining my pain to someone who uses my explanation as another place to hide. I refuse to keep handing my dignity to a conversation that has never protected it. I refuse to wait for an apology before I begin returning to myself. Soft pause. This is not about pretending you do not care. You may care. You may still have memories that soften you. You may still remember the beginning. You may still feel a strange tenderness when their name appears somewhere unexpected. You may still wonder if they ever think about you with regret. That does not mean you are going backward. Healing does not erase memory. It changes your relationship to memory. At first, memory may feel like a hand pulling you underwater. Later, it becomes a photograph you can look at without stepping back into the room where you were harmed. That takes time. And while you are learning, Be careful with the stories your loneliness tells you. Loneliness may say, maybe it was not that bad. Longing may say, maybe I should reach out. Fear may say, what if no one ever loves me again? Nostalgia may say, remember the good parts. Shame may say, you lost too much to leave with nothing. But truth can answer softly, I am not leaving with nothing. I am leaving with myself. And that is not a small thing. Because there was a season when you almost lost her. The woman inside you. The one who knew. The one who felt. The one who kept trying to speak. The one who got quiet because every truth seemed to make the relationship more fragile. The one who learned to measure her words, monitor moods, and make peace with less than she needed. Bringing her back is not nothing. It may be the most sacred work of your life. Pause. Sometimes closure begins with writing the sentence they never gave you. Not to send it. Not to perform healing. But to give your own heart a place to land. You might write, what happened hurt me. I waited for you to become honest. And in that waiting, I became exhausted. I loved you with sincerity. But sincerity alone could not make the relationship safe. I deserved consistency, not confusion. I deserved care, not emotional disappearance. I deserved a love that did not make me feel ashamed for needing reassurance. And even if you never understand the damage, I will stop denying it to keep your image clean. Let those sentences become a mirror, because your healing may require you to stop protecting the person who left you emotionally unprotected. This does not mean you expose everything to everyone. Not every pain belongs in public. Not every story needs an audience. But your private truth must have room somewhere. In your journal, in prayer, in therapy, with one trusted friend, in a quiet walk where you finally speak aloud what you have been swallowing. Pain that never gets language often becomes a prison. And grown women know this kind of prison well. They know how to keep going while carrying words they never say. They know how to answer, I'm fine, while feeling emotionally bruised. They know how to put lipstick over exhaustion. They know how to show up for family gatherings and act gracious while their inner life is full of unanswered goodbyes. They know how to keep the house running while their spirit is asking for rest. But at some point, the soul says, enough. Not loudly, not violently, just truthfully. Enough of pretending I was not wounded. Enough of calling abandonment complicated. Enough of shrinking my needs into something more convenient. Enough of waiting for someone else's honesty to give me permission to trust my own. That is a blossom. Do you understand? A blossom is not always pretty at first. Sometimes it looks like a woman finally saying, I know what I know. Soft pause. And there will be days when you doubt it. There will be days when you feel strong in the morning and fragile by evening. Days when you are certain you are done. Then a song, a place, a date, a smell, a small memory pulls you back into the ache. Do not use those days as evidence that you are failing. Grief is not a straight road. It circles back to collect what was left behind. Sometimes you are not going backward. You are meeting another layer of loss. Maybe today you are grieving the person. Tomorrow you are grieving the years. Another day you are grieving your trust. Another day you are grieving the version of yourself who used to believe love was safer than it turned out to be. Each layer deserves kindness. You cannot shame your way out of grief. You cannot punish your heart into blooming. You cannot insult the wounded parts of yourself and expect them to feel safe enough to heal. Speak to yourself as you would speak to a woman you deeply respect. Would you tell her she was stupid for loving? Would you tell her she deserved confusion because she stayed? Would you tell her she should be embarrassed for missing someone who hurt her? Would you tell her that her pain is invalid because the person who caused it refuses to admit it? No, you would sit beside her. You would lower your voice. You would say, I understand why this hurts. You would say, you were trying to make sense of something that kept changing shape. You would say, your heart was loyal, not foolish. You would say, but now your loyalty must come home. Let this breathe. Your loyalty must come home because some women remain loyal to the relationship long after the relationship has stopped being loyal to them. They protect it in conversation. They defend it in memory. They soften the facts. They explain the neglect. They hide the humiliation. They keep carrying the emotional labor of something that no longer carries them. And eventually, the question becomes, what would happen if you became as loyal to your own peace as you were to their potential? What would happen if you stopped giving your best interpretation to someone's repeated harm? What would happen if you believed your own exhaustion? What would happen if you honored the woman who kept whispering, this is hurting me? Not as an enemy of love, but as a protector of your life. Because love that requires you to betray yourself is not love. You can safely live inside. It may have moments of beauty. It may have moments of tenderness. It may have memories you will carry. But a few beautiful flowers do not make a garden healthy if the roots are constantly being poisoned. Pause. Closure may not come as one final answer. It may come as a series of quiet acceptances. Acceptance that you may never know the full truth. Acceptance that their silence says something, even if it does not say everything. Acceptance that an apology without accountability cannot carry your healing. Acceptance that someone can regret losing access to you without truly understanding how they harmed you. Acceptance that you are allowed to leave emotional confusion without solving it first. That last one matters. You are allowed to leave emotional confusion without solving it first. Because some confusion is not a puzzle. It is a pattern. And patterns do not need endless analysis. They need recognition. When someone disappears and returns repeatedly, that is a pattern. When someone apologizes but does not change, that is a pattern. When someone makes you feel needy for needing basic respect, that is a pattern. When someone gives tenderness only when they sense you pulling away, that is a pattern. When someone benefits from your love but avoids your pain, that is a pattern. And once you recognize the pattern, you do not need to keep interviewing the pieces. You can say, I see. Those two words can carry a woman across a river. Easy. I see what I minimized. I see what I excused. I see what I hoped would change. I see where I abandoned myself. I see why I was tired. I see why my body was anxious. I see why my soul felt lonely. And because I see, I can begin, not perfectly, not without tears, not without missing them, but honestly, soft pause. There is a sacred difference between waiting for closure and creating an ending. Waiting for closure keeps the pen in their hand. Creating an ending puts the pen back in yours. It says, this chapter may not have ended with the respect I deserved, but I will not let disrespect write the rest of my story. It says, I may never receive the apology I wanted, but I can still give myself the protection I needed. It says, they may never validate my pain, but I will not betray my own knowing again. It says, I can grieve what happened without making my grief a permanent address. That is where the heart begins to blossom again. Not because the past becomes beautiful, but because the future is no longer being held hostage by someone else's silence. And perhaps today, the blossom is simply this. You stop waiting for them to become brave enough to tell the truth. And you become brave enough to live by the truth you already know. You stop dragging an unanswered goodbye through the rooms of your mind. You stop leaving the light on for an apology that may never knock. You stop confusing their inability to face you with your inability to heal. And slowly, quietly, without needing anyone to clap for you, you begin to return to your breath, to your body, to your mornings, to your own voice, to the small, ordinary things that pain made blurry. You begin to notice that you can drink coffee without rehearsing what you wish you had said. You can pass a familiar place without becoming undone for the rest of the day. You can hear their name and still remain inside yourself. You can feel sadness rise and not mistake it for a command to return. You can miss them and still choose peace. That is growth. That is strength with tenderness still alive. That is a woman learning to bloom without asking the storm for permission. Pause. So if you are still waiting for closure, be gentle with yourself. But begin to loosen your grip, not all at once. Just enough to breathe. Just enough to admit maybe the explanation I wanted would not have healed me anyway. Because sometimes the closure we imagine is not powerful enough to repair the damage. Sometimes, even if they came back and said every sentence correctly, you would still have to do the work of trusting yourself again. You would still have to rebuild the parts of you that learned to doubt reality. You would still have to soothe the body that lived in uncertainty. You would still have to grieve the years. You would still have to forgive yourself for staying. You would still have to learn how to be safe in your own presence. So perhaps closure is not something they owe you before you can begin. Perhaps closure is something you create each time you stop abandoning yourself for one more answer. Each time you choose not to send the message. Each time you tell the truth without needing them to agree. Each time you protect your peace without explaining it to someone who has already shown you they will not protect it. Each time you say, I am allowed to heal even without their apology. And yes, that may hurt, but it is a clean hurt. The kind that leads somewhere. The kind that brings your power back into your own hands. Because you were never meant to leave your life waiting in someone else's unread messages. You were never meant to make your healing depend on someone else's emotional courage. You were never meant to keep standing at the door of what wounded you, asking it to become the place where you are restored. The restoration may happen elsewhere. In quieter rooms, in honest mornings, in your own breath returning, in the way you stop explaining your worth, in the way you no longer confuse being contacted with being cherished, in the way you begin to understand that your heart can remain tender without remaining available to harm. That is the beginning of a different life. Not a perfect life, not a life without memory, but a life where you are no longer begging the past to become kinder before you allow yourself to move. Soft pause. And in the next part, we need to talk about the hardest return of all. Returning to your own body, your own peace, your own daily life after heartbreak has trained you to live in anxiety, waiting, and emotional survival. Because a heart blossoms, again, not only in the mind, it blossoms in the ordinary hours where a woman slowly learns how to feel safe with herself. There comes a moment after deep emotional pain when the heart is not the only place that needs healing. The body needs healing too, because your body remembers what your mouth learned to hide. It remembers the nights you lay awake with your eyes open, replaying conversations no one else knew were still living inside you. It remembers the mornings when you woke already tired, already bracing, already wondering if today would bring warmth or distance. It remembers the way your stomach tightened when the phone stayed silent. It remembers how your breath changed when you sensed the shift in their tone. It remembers how often you pretended to be calm while your inner life was shaking. And sometimes, long after the relationship has ended, the body is still living as if the uncertainty might return at any moment. Pausa. This is why healing can feel confusing. You may say, I know the truth now, but your chest still tightens. Your sleep still breaks. Your mind still searches. Your heart still listens for a message. Your body still reacts to silence. Like silence is danger. That does not mean you are failing. It means your system learned survival. And survival does not always end the day the relationship ends. Sometimes survival continues until safety becomes believable again. Let that be gentle in you. A woman who has lived in emotional inconsistency may not recognize peace right away. Peace may feel strange. Peace may feel too quiet. Peace may feel like waiting for the next disappointment. Peace may feel empty because anxiety used to fill the room. And this is the part many women are never told. When chaos has been familiar, calm can feel uncomfortable before it feels safe. You may find yourself wanting to check their page, wanting to reread old messages, wanting to know if they miss you, wanting to test whether the connection still has a pulse, wanting to disturb your own peace just to feel something familiar. Not because you truly want the pain again, but because the body sometimes mistakes familiar pain for connection. It says, at least I know this feeling. Even when that feeling was breaking you. Soft pause. Ask yourself with kindness, am I reaching for love or am I reaching for the emotional pattern my body has memorized? That question can save you from calling a wound a desire. Because there are moments when you do not miss the person as much as you miss the cycle. The waiting, the tension, the small relief, the apology, the hope, the ache, the promise that maybe this time something would finally change. When that cycle disappears, your body may feel like it has lost the thing it was trained to monitor. So now it must learn a new rhythm. A rhythm without emergency. A rhythm without emotional chasing. A rhythm without making another person's attention the weather of your entire day. This is not easy, especially for a grown woman who still has responsibilities. You may not have the luxury of falling apart. You may still have children asking questions, work waiting for you, bills that do not care about your heartbreak, aging parents, family expectations, appointments, meals, laundry, people who depend on your steadiness while you are trying to recover your own. So your healing may not look dramatic. It may look like sitting in the car for 3 minutes before going inside. It may look like taking a deep breath in the bathroom at work. It may look like crying quietly, then washing your face and returning to the room. It may look like cooking dinner while your heart is somewhere else. It may look like choosing not to send one message, then surviving the ache that follows. Do not dismiss those moments. Those are not small victories. Those are the quiet places where a woman begins to rebuild her life. A heart blossoms again through ordinary courage. Not the kind that gets applause. The kind that gets you through Tuesday. Pausa. There is a kind of strength that looks very plain. Changing the sheets. Opening the curtains. Answering one email. Eating something warm. Taking a walk. Putting your hand on your chest and saying, I am still here. Turning the phone face down and letting the silence be silence, not a wound to solve. These things may sound simple, but when a woman has been living in emotional survival, simple things become sacred because heartbreak can scatter you. It can pull your attention out of your own life and fasten it to someone else's moods, choices, messages, absence, and uncertainty. You may realize one day that you know more about their patterns than your own needs. You know, when they usually withdraw, you know what words might upset them. You know how to soften your tone. You know how to wait. You know how to read distance. You know how to survive disappointment. But do you know what calms you now? Do you know what nourishes you? Do you know what your body needs when it is tired? Do you know what your own voice sounds like when it is not explaining, defending, or hoping? These are not light questions. They are the beginning of return, because after being emotionally abandoned, many women do not only need to leave someone else, they need to come back to themselves. Soft pause. Coming back to yourself is not a slogan. It is a practice. It is noticing when you are abandoning your own reality again. It is noticing when you call something not a big deal, even though your body feels heavy afterward. It is noticing when you want to apologize for having a boundary. It is noticing when you feel tempted to protect someone else's comfort at the expense of your own peace. It is noticing when loneliness tries to bargain with your dignity. And then gently you choose differently. Not perfectly, just honestly, you say, I can feel lonely and still not return to confusion. You say, I can miss the beautiful moments and still respect the harmful pattern. You say, I can have compassion for them without reopening myself to what damaged me. You say, I can grieve without making grief a reason to betray myself again. That is how self-trust grows. One honest choice at a time, not by making promises you cannot keep, not by forcing yourself to be over it, not by pretending you never loved them, but by becoming a safe place for your own truth. Because for a long time, your truth may not have felt safe. Maybe when you said you were hurt, they called you dramatic. Maybe when you asked for consistency, they called you demanding. Maybe when you noticed distance, they told you it was all in your head. Maybe when you needed reassurance, they made you feel like your needs were a burden. And after hearing that enough, you may have begun to speak to yourself the same way. You may have started saying, I am too sensitive. I ask for too much. I should be easier. I should stop caring. I should be stronger. But healing requires a new inner voice. Not a voice that flatters you, a voice that tells the truth with mercy. A voice that says, my needs are not shameful. My body is allowed to respond to pain. My exhaustion is not weakness. My longing is not a command. My memories are not instructions. My tenderness deserves protection. Let those sentences become part of your return. Pause. Sometimes you must mother the wounded places in yourself. Not because you are childish, but because some parts of you were left alone for too long. The part that kept waiting for someone to come back emotionally. The part that felt replaceable. The part that panicked when affection disappeared. The part that tried to become perfect so love would stay. The part that mistook uncertainty for passion because peace had not been modeled clearly enough. You do not heal those parts by insulting them. You heal them by meeting them. You sit beside them inwardly and say, I understand why you reached. I understand why you hoped. I understand why silence scared you. But we are learning another way now. There is quiet power in speaking to yourself like someone worth saving, and you are worth saving. Not because you performed enough goodness, not because you endured enough pain, not because you proved you were loyal, not because someone finally regrets losing you. You are worth saving because you are a living soul, because your peace matters, because your body is not a battlefield for someone else's inconsistency, because your heart was never meant to survive on almost love. Soft pause. Almost love can be one of the hardest things to heal from because it gives you enough to remember, but not enough to rest. Enough tenderness to keep the story alive. Not enough commitment to make it safe. Enough apology to soften you. Not enough change to repair you. Enough closeness to awaken hope. Not enough steadiness to protect it. And so you end up grieving something that was real in moments, but unreliable in form. That is a very specific kind of heartbreak. It makes you wonder whether you have the right to grieve. Because part of you says, but there were good days. Yes, there may have been good days, There may have been laughter. There may have been warmth. There may have been meaningful conversations. There may have been moments when you felt seen. But a relationship is not measured only by its best moments. It must also be measured by what it did to your nervous system over time. Did it help you become more whole? Or did it teach you to live in pieces? Did it give you rest? Or did it keep you emotionally alert? Did it make you feel safe, to be honest? Or did it train you to edit your truth? Did it expand your life? Or did it slowly narrow you into waiting, worrying, and hoping? These questions are not harsh. They are clear. And clarity is one of the first medicines after confusion. Pausa. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but it needs a new environment. Not just away from the person, away from the pattern, away from the habit of explaining away your pain, away from the impulse to abandon yourself when someone withdraws, away from the belief that love must be earned by suffering quietly. You may need to build that environment slowly, with routines that restore you, with people who do not make you feel guilty for having feelings, with spaces where your body can breathe, with boundaries that are not announced dramatically, but practiced consistently, with silence that is no longer punishment, but rest, because silence changes when you are no longer waiting inside it. The silence that once made you panic can become a place where you hear yourself again. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You may reach for noise, for distractions, for their page, for old messages, for anything that keeps you from sitting with the ache. But there is a deeper healing that happens when you stop running from your own company. You may discover that your own presence is not the enemy. Your own quiet is not empty. Your own life still has warmth in it. There are mornings that belong to you, songs that belong to you, food that tastes good again, rooms that can be rearranged, friendships that can be restored, dreams that were waiting beneath survival. And slowly, your world begins to widen. Not all at once, but enough for light to enter. Soft pause. Do not underestimate the grief of rebuilding a routine. When someone has occupied your emotional world for a long time, even their absence has a shape. You may notice it at night, the hour when you used to expect a message, the side of the bed where memory gathers, the quiet after the children sleep, the drive home, the grocery aisle, the song you avoid, the restaurant you cannot pass without feeling the past rise in your throat. This is not weakness. This is your life reorganizing itself around a loss. Be patient with that reorganization. You are not just removing a person. You are removing the emotional furniture of an old life. And that takes time. There will be empty spaces. Do not rush to fill them with another person just because emptiness frightens you. Let some spaces remain open long enough for you to learn what belongs there. Maybe rest belongs there. Maybe friendship belongs there. Maybe creativity belongs there. Maybe prayer belongs there. Maybe your own laughter belongs there. Maybe a version of you that has been waiting quietly for years belongs there. A woman does not blossom again by replacing the old pain with a new distraction. She blossoms when she learns how to inhabit her life again. Pausa. This may be where you begin to practice emotional safety. Not as an idea, as a daily choice. When you wake up, before reaching for the phone, place a hand over your heart. Ask, what do I need today that does not depend on someone else's mood? Maybe you need gentleness. Maybe you need structure. Maybe you need movement. Maybe you need to stop checking. Maybe you need to let yourself cry for 10 minutes and then make breakfast. Maybe you need to tell the truth in your journal because you have been trying to look stronger than you feel. There is no shame in needing care. The woman who carried everyone else still needs somewhere to lay her head. And sometimes that place must begin within her. not because she should never need others, but because she must stop abandoning herself while waiting for someone else to become safe. You can build inner safety by keeping small promises to yourself. I will not check their page tonight. I will eat something even if I feel numb. I will not answer a message that pulls me back into confusion. I will rest without earning it. I will tell one true sentence today. I will not call my needs too much. Small promises matter after betrayal because betrayal often teaches the heart that promises are unreliable. So when you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you begin to repair the bridge between your soul and your own life. Soft pause. And if you break the promise, begin again. Do not turn one weak moment into a verdict against your character. Maybe you checked, maybe you replied, maybe you cried, maybe you looked at old photos. Maybe you missed them so badly you felt embarrassed by your own heart. Begin again. Healing is not ruined by a moment of longing. A garden is not dead because one storm returned. You do not need perfection. You need return to truth. Return to breath. Return to the woman inside you who is learning that she can survive an emotional wave without obeying it. That is a powerful lesson. Feelings are real, but feelings are not always instructions. Longing is real, but longing does not always know where safety lives. Memory is real, but memory often edits pain when loneliness is speaking. So when an emotional wave rises, you can say, I feel this. I honor that it is here, but I do not have to build my next choice from this ache. That is maturity. That is dignity in motion. That is a heart learning to be guided by truth, not just by pain. Pausa. Your body may need tenderness too, not performance. Tenderness. After heartbreak, many women become strangers to their bodies. They are present physically, but emotionally they are somewhere else. They forget to eat well. They lose sleep. They move through the day like a machine. They criticize the mirror. They feel older suddenly. They wonder if the stress changed their face. They compare themselves to someone else. They ask whether they were left because they were not beautiful enough, young enough, exciting enough, easy enough. Please hear this with all the gentleness it deserves. Someone's inability to love you with integrity is not a measurement of your beauty. Someone's emotional absence is not proof that your body failed. Someone's betrayal is not evidence that another woman had more value. Do not let someone else's disorder become a mirror you use against yourself. Your body carried you through what your heart could barely name. It deserves gratitude, not punishment. It deserves food, rest, water, movement, soft clothing, fresh air. A hand placed kindly over the places that have held grief. Your body is not just something to be judged. It is the home you are returning to. And a woman who is returning home must stop speaking to her body like an enemy. Soft pause. Maybe part of blooming again is learning to feel at home in yourself without needing to be desired by the person who wounded you. That is a quiet revolution. Because when love has made you feel unchosen, it is easy to search for worth through being wanted again. But being wanted is not the same as being cherished. Attention is not the same as care. Desire is not the same as devotion. A message is not the same as repair. Someone missing access to you is not the same as someone being capable of honoring you. Let that truth settle. You are not healing so you can become desirable enough to make them regret it. You are healing so you can become peaceful enough to stop using their regret as proof of your value. That is freedom. Not loud freedom. Not bitter freedom, but the kind of freedom that lets you walk through your own life without constantly looking over your shoulder to see whether the past is watching. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again. And sometimes the blossom is not romance. Sometimes it is nervous system peace. Sometimes it is clear sleep. Sometimes it is appetite returning. Sometimes it is laughing with a friend. Sometimes it is putting on music in the kitchen. Sometimes it is making plans that do not include waiting. Sometimes it is looking in the mirror and seeing not a woman who is abandoned, but a woman who survived emotional winter and still has spring inside her. Pause. Let this be your gentle practice today. Choose one small way to come back to yourself. Noten. 1. Open the window. Drink water. Take a walk. Write the truth. Call someone safe. Delete one thread if you are ready. Mute what keeps reopening the wound. Rest without apologizing. Touch your heart and say, I am allowed to heal without rushing. One small return, one sign to your body that the danger is no longer in charge. One sign to your soul that you are no longer leaving yourself alone. Because the woman you are becoming does not need to be rebuilt through pressure. She needs to be invited back through patience. And she will come in pieces, in mornings, in small acts of care, in quiet boundaries. In the first day, you realize you did not think about them as much. In the first evening, you feel peaceful without needing proof from anyone. In the first moment, you understand that your life still belongs to you. That moment will come softly. And when it comes, do not dismiss it. It may be the first petal, the first sign, the first breath of a heart that once thought it would never open again. Soft pause. And in the next part, we need to speak about boundaries, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as the sacred structure that allows a tender woman to remain tender without being destroyed by what she loves. There is a moment in healing when a woman realizes that tenderness alone will not protect her. Tenderness may help her love. Tenderness may help her forgive. Tenderness may help her understand. Tenderness may keep her human after disappointment. But tenderness without boundaries can leave her standing open in places where her spirit keeps getting wounded. And this is painful to admit, because many women were taught to believe that if their love was deep enough, patient enough, graceful enough, forgiving enough, then the relationship would become safe. So they gave more tenderness, more understanding, more benefit of the doubt, more soft explanations, more chances after silence, more emotional labor after disappointment, more room for someone who kept making less room for them. And slowly, love became a place where they disappeared. Pause. A boundary is not the opposite of love. A boundary is what allows love to remain honest. It says, I can care about you, but I cannot keep abandoning myself to prove it. It says, I can understand your wounds, but I will not become the place where you avoid healing. It says, I can be compassionate, but I will not make my peace the price of your comfort. It says, I can forgive what happened, but forgiveness does not require me to return to the same pattern that broke me. That is not cruelty. That is wisdom with a pulse. That is a woman learning how to be kind without becoming available for harm. And perhaps this is one of the most difficult lessons after betrayal or silent abandonment. You can love someone and still need distance from them. You can miss someone and still keep the door closed. You can wish them well and still refuse to let them back into your nervous system. You can remember the good and still honor the pattern. A boundary does not mean your heart has turned cold. It means your heart has finally become included in your own decisions. Soft pause. Ask yourself gently, when you called it love, were you also leaving yourself unprotected? Because some women think they have a problem with loving too deeply. But often the deeper issue is not the depth of their love. It is the absence of protection around it. Your love may be beautiful. Your loyalty may be rare. Your forgiveness may be sincere. Your heart may still be capable of giving warmth in a world that often rewards coldness. But even beautiful love needs a gate. Even a garden needs a fence. Not to keep out sunlight, but to keep roots from being trampled by those who do not know how to walk carefully. There is no shame in needing protection. There is no shame in saying, my heart is generous, but it is not public property. There is no shame in saying, access to me must come with respect. There is no shame in saying, I will no longer call repeated pain a complicated relationship. For many women, this sentence alone feels like a revolution because they have been trained to explain everything, to soften everything, to make painful behavior sound less painful so no one would be uncomfortable. They say, he is just stressed. He is not good with emotions. He had a hard childhood. He is afraid of commitment. He does not know how to communicate. He loves me in his own way. Maybe some of those things are true, but truth is not complete if it leaves you bleeding quietly. A hard childhood may explain emotional distance. It does not make your loneliness harmless. Stress may explain withdrawal. It does not erase the damage of repeated silence. Fear may explain inconsistency. It does not make it safe for you to build your life around uncertainty. Someone can have reasons and still have responsibility. Someone can be wounded and still be accountable. Someone can struggle and still need to treat your heart with care. Soft pause. Here is a deeper truth. Your compassion becomes dangerous when it makes you ignore the cost to yourself. Compassion is meant to soften the heart, not erase the self. When compassion has no boundary, it can turn into emotional self-neglect. You begin to understand them more than you understand yourself. You become fluent in their pain, but mute in your own. You know why they withdraw. You know why they avoid. You know why they cannot show up. You know why they need time. You know why they get defensive. You know why they disappear. But do you know why you are exhausted? Do you know why your chest tightens? Do you know why your joy has become quiet? Do you know why your body no longer trusts peace? Do you know why you feel lonely with someone you keep defending? A boundary begins when your own suffering is finally allowed to matter too. Not more than theirs, not less than theirs, but equally, because you are not an emotional shelter built only for other people's storms. You are a woman with a soul that also needs covering. Pausa. Many women fear boundaries because they believe boundaries will make them seem difficult. They worry they will be called cold, selfish, too sensitive, ungrateful, demanding, hard to love. And sometimes the person who benefited from your lack of boundaries will call you those things when you finally begin to have them. Do not be surprised by that. When someone has grown comfortable with your silence, your self-respect may feel like an offense. When someone has benefited from your overgiving, your limit may feel like punishment. When someone has had access to you without responsibility, your boundary may feel like rejection. But a boundary is not punishment. It is information. It tells the truth about what your life can no longer absorb. It says, this is where I end. This is where my peace begins. This is what I will not keep normalizing. This is what love must look like if it wants access to me. And a person who truly wants to love you well will not need your boundary to disappear. They will need to understand why it is there. Soft pause. There is a difference between someone who dislikes your boundary because it exposes their behavior and someone who respects your boundary because they value your well-being. Pay attention to that difference. It will tell you a great deal. A safe person may feel uncomfortable with your boundary, but they will not punish you for having one. A safe person may need time to understand, but they will not make you beg for the right to protect yourself. A safe person may feel hurt, but they will still care about the fact that you were hurt too. An unsafe person will turn your boundary into proof that you are the problem. They will say you changed. They will say you are overreacting. They will say you are making things hard. They will say you are punishing them. They will remind you of everything they did right, so you will feel guilty for naming what they kept doing wrong. And if you are not careful, you may start shrinking again. You may start explaining the boundary until it becomes softer than the wound. You may start apologizing for needing the very thing that protects you. You may start negotiating with yourself. Maybe I should answer. Maybe I should be nicer. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should give one more chance. But before you do, ask yourself, am I softening because love is safe here? Or am I softening because guilt has entered the room? That question matters. Because guilt is not always conscience. Sometimes guilt is the withdrawal symptom of no longer abandoning yourself. Pause. When a woman first sets boundaries after years of emotional overgiving, she may feel guilty simply because she is doing something unfamiliar. She may feel cruel when she is actually being clear. She may feel selfish when she is actually becoming honest. She may feel mean when she is simply refusing to keep absorbing pain. This is why healing requires patience. You are not only changing your behavior, you are changing the old inner rule that said, I must be easy to keep in order to be loved. You are changing the old belief that said, my needs create distance. You are changing the old fear that said, if I stop giving so much, I will be left. You are changing the old wound that said, being chosen is more important than being whole. That kind of change can shake the ground beneath you. So move gently, but do move. A boundary can begin small, not answering immediately, not explaining your whole heart to someone who has repeatedly mishandled it, not checking their page when you already know it will disturb your peace, not accepting vague words when your body needs consistent behavior, not returning to a conversation that always leaves you feeling smaller, not saying it's okay when it is not okay, not calling yourself dramatic for being affected. These are not dramatic acts. They are quiet acts of return. Each one says, I am here now. Each one says, I will not leave myself alone with this pain again. Soft pause. And let us be honest. Boundaries may grieve you. Sometimes the boundary you need is not the boundary you want. You may want to talk, but you need silence. You may want to explain, but you need distance. You may want one more answer, but you need to stop reopening the wound. You may want to believe they have changed, but you need to observe whether their behavior carries the weight of their words. You may want to be generous, but you need to stop giving from the part of you that is already depleted. This is why boundaries can feel like loss, because sometimes the boundary stands between you and the version of the relationship you wish you had. It asks you to stop crossing into fantasy. It asks you to remain loyal to reality. And reality may hurt, but reality is also where healing can begin. You cannot heal in the imagined version of someone. You cannot heal in their potential. You cannot heal in the apology you hope they will one day mean. You cannot heal in the future you built alone. You heal where truth is allowed to stand uncovered. Pause. Maybe the truth is simple. They were inconsistent. They were emotionally unavailable. They enjoyed your loyalty, but did not honor your vulnerability. They wanted access without accountability. They gave affection when it suited them and distance when your needs required something real. They let you carry confusion. They could have helped clarify. They made you feel hard to love for needing love to have a shape. That truth may be painful, but it is not your enemy. It is a lantern. It shows you where you are. It shows you where you cannot remain. And it shows you why The boundary is not bitterness. It is direction. Soft pulls. There is a kind of woman who has been hurt so deeply that she begins to think her only choices are to stay soft and be destroyed, or become hard and never be hurt again. But there is another way, a braver way, a more mature way. Remain tender, become discerning, remain compassionate, become honest, remain open to love, become closed to disrespect, remain graceful, become unwilling to negotiate with abandonment. You do not have to become stone to stop being wounded by every hand that reaches for you. You can become a garden with a gate, alive, fragrant, growing, but no longer open to those who come only to take, trample, or admire without care. That is the kind of blossoming that does not ask permission. It does not need applause. It does not need revenge. It simply grows differently, with wisdom in the roots. Pausa. And boundaries are not only for other people. Sometimes the most important boundary is the one you create with your own longing. Because longing can be persuasive. It can speak with the voice of memory. It can bring back the good days, the laughing, the way they looked at you once, the message that made you smile, the small tenderness, the beginning before everything became complicated. Longing will say, maybe reach out. Maybe they miss you. Maybe enough time has passed. Maybe this silence means something. Maybe the good part can return. And in those moments, you need not attack yourself. Longing is not your enemy. It is a part of you still grieving. But grief does not get to drive every decision. You can listen to longing the way you would listen to a tired child, with tenderness, but not with obedience. You can say, I hear you. I know you miss what felt good. I know you want relief. But we are not going back into confusion just to soothe one lonely evening. That is a boundary too. A boundary with the part of you that would rather choose familiar pain than unfamiliar peace. Soft pause. This is how you begin to become safe for yourself. You stop treating every feeling as a command. You stop treating every memory as a sign. You stop treating every moment of loneliness as evidence that you made the wrong choice. You stop treating their occasional kindness as proof that the pattern was not harmful. You stop treating your grief as permission to abandon your own healing. And slowly your inner life begins to trust you again. Because self-trust grows when you protect yourself in the moments when it would be easier to betray yourself. Not when it is simple, not when you feel strong, but when the night is quiet and the phone is near and memory is softening the edges of what hurt you. That is where the new woman is formed. Not in public declarations, not in perfect confidence, but in the private moment when you choose peace with trembling hands. Pausa. Maybe tonight that choice looks small. You do not send the message. You do not reread the thread. You do not argue with someone committed to misunderstanding you. You do not accept a vague apology that asks for access but offers no accountability. You do not answer the call just because loneliness made the room feel too wide. You do not give your heart back to someone simply because they finally noticed your absence. And then you breathe. You feel the ache. You let the wave rise. You let it pass without building your life around it. That is not weakness. That is emotional discipline born from self-respect. And it may feel lonely at first, because boundaries often remove noise before they bring peace. They remove the drama, the waiting, the familiar ache, the cycle, the anxious checking, the repeated conversations, the hope that kept reopening the wound. And when all of that noise leaves, you may meet yourself in the quiet. At first, that can be uncomfortable, but do not run from it too quickly. In that quiet, you may begin to hear what your soul has been saying beneath the chaos. I am tired. I want peace. I miss myself. I do not want to keep calling this love if it keeps costing me my dignity. I want to bloom somewhere my roots are safe. Listen, that voice is not bitterness. That voice is your life asking to be lived again. Soft pause. There will be people who do not understand your boundary because they only saw your patience. They saw you stay. They saw you forgive. They saw you keep functioning. They saw you smile. They saw you make excuses. They saw you keep showing up. So when you finally step back, they may think you changed suddenly. But you did not change suddenly. You were hurting quietly for a long time. The boundary may be new to them, but the pain is not new to you. And you do not need to present a full history of your suffering to justify your decision to protect your peace. You do not need to convince everyone that the winter was cold. You lived through it. That is enough. Pausa. A grown woman does not need to make a courtroom out of her life. She does not have to call witnesses for every wound. She does not have to show evidence to people who are committed to misunderstanding her. She does not have to reopen her pain so others can decide whether it was serious enough. Sometimes dignity is quiet. It says, I know why I left. I know why I stopped answering. I know why I need distance. I know what my body endured. I know what my spirit was trying to tell me. And that knowing becomes enough. Not because it is easy, but because you are tired of betraying your own reality for the comfort of others. Soft pause. This is where a woman begins to bloom differently. She no longer mistakes attention for safety. She no longer mistakes regret for repair. She no longer mistakes being missed for being valued. She no longer mistakes a long history for a healthy future. She no longer mistakes her ability to endure pain for proof that she should keep enduring it. She begins to ask better questions. Not, do they still want me? But, can they love me without harming my peace? Not, do they miss me? But, have they grown in a way that makes closeness safe? Not, can I forgive them? But, can I remain whole if I return? Not, was it all bad? But, was the good enough to carry the weight of the harm? These questions do not come from bitterness. They come from maturity. Because a woman who is healed enough to tell the truth no longer chooses love only by how it feels in the sweetest moment. She watches what it does over time. She watches how it handles conflict. She watches whether apology becomes behavior. She watches whether her body feels safe. She watches whether her voice becomes freer or quieter. She watches whether she is becoming more herself or less. That is discernment. And discernment is one of the flowers that grows after pain. Pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but it will not blossom well in the same soil that taught it to shrink. This is not about blaming yourself for where you planted your love before. You did what you knew how to do. You loved with the tools you had. You hoped with the heart you carried. You endured what you could until something inside you finally said no more. Now you are learning to choose soil differently. Not perfect soil. There is no perfect person. No perfect relationship. No life without disappointment. But there is a difference between imperfection and emotional harm. There is a difference between human mistakes and repeated patterns that leave you anxious, diminished, and confused. There is a difference between someone learning and someone avoiding. There is a difference between someone struggling to love you well and someone benefiting from you staying while they do not grow. Your healing will teach you that difference. Slowly, clearly, sometimes painfully, but once you see it, do not unsee it just because loneliness knocks. Soft pause. Let this be a boundary you carry gently. I will not use my loneliness as an excuse to return to what made me lonely in the first place. Read that again inside yourself. I will not use my loneliness as an excuse to return to what made me lonely in the first place. Because some relationships leave you lonelier inside them than you are outside them. At least outside them, the loneliness has truth in it. Inside them, the loneliness wears the disguise of connection. And that kind of loneliness can break a woman quietly. She's with someone but unsupported, attached but unsure, available but unseen, loyal but not cherished, present but emotionally starving. No, you were not made for that. You were not made to stand beside someone and still feel abandoned. You were not made to keep translating absence into love. You were not made to reduce your needs until they fit inside someone else's avoidance. You were made to be met with clarity, not perfection, clarity, consistency, care, respect. A love that does not require you to keep betraying your own nervous system. Pause. And until that kind of love is present, you are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to remain single without treating singleness like failure. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be selective. You are allowed to stop performing availability. You are allowed to stop proving you are easy to love. You are allowed to stop auditioning for the emotional presence someone should have brought willingly. This is not hardness. This is sacred self-respect. And sacred self-respect may feel unfamiliar to a woman who has spent years managing other people's emotions. But with practice, it will begin to feel like home. At first, you may feel guilty. Then you may feel afraid. Then you may feel lonely. Then, one day, in a quiet, ordinary moment, you may feel something else. Relief. Not dramatic relief. Not loud relief. A soft breath in your body that says, I am not bracing anymore. That relief is one of the first blossoms. Do not overlook it. Pause. A boundary is a promise you make to the woman you are becoming. It says, I will not let my compassion erase my discernment. I will not let my history with someone become a chain around my future. I will not call repeated confusion love. I will not stay available to what keeps wounding me. I will not punish myself for wanting tenderness, but I will protect myself from places where tenderness is consumed without care. I will not become cold. I will become clear. That last sentence is important. I will not become cold. I will become clear. Because clarity is not coldness. Clarity is the lamp you carry when you finally stop walking through someone else's fog. It helps you see where to place your feet. It helps you know when to pause. It helps you recognize danger without becoming afraid of every road. It helps you protect your heart without closing it forever. And this is the kind of woman pain can form if she lets wisdom rise from it. Not bitter, not desperate, not hardened, not naive, but awake. Tender, rooted, able to love, but no longer willing to disappear for it. Soft pause. So if your heart is learning boundaries now, be patient with yourself. You may wobble, you may question, you may cry, you may miss the version of you who could love without caution. But maybe that version of you was not foolish. Maybe she was beautiful. And maybe the woman you are becoming is beautiful too. Not because she loves less, but because she has learned to love with herself still present. That is the healing. That is the return. That is the blossom after hurt. A woman standing in her own life, hand over her heart, no longer begging to be chosen by someone who could not see the sacredness of what she offered. A woman saying quietly, "My love is still alive, but now it has a gate, and only what honors my peace may enter. Let this breathe." In the next part, we need to speak about the life after boundaries, the quiet loneliness, the fear of starting over, the grief over lost years, and the tender courage it takes to believe that your future is still allowed to hold beauty. After a woman sets a boundary, there is often a silence that follows. Not the same silence that once punished her. Not the silence of waiting for someone inconsistent to return. Not the silence of checking the phone and pretending she was not hoping. This silence is different. It is the silence after the cycle stops. The silence after she no longer explains. The silence after she no longer reaches. The silence after she no longer offers her heart as a bridge for someone who kept refusing to cross. And at first, that silence may not feel like peace. It may feel like emptiness. Pause. There is a lonely kind of courage that comes after choosing yourself. People speak often about the strength it takes to leave what hurts you, but not enough people speak about the quiet hours afterward. The evenings when you are not arguing anymore, but you are still aching. The mornings when no message comes and a part of you feels both relieved and abandoned. The weekends that used to be filled with hoping, explaining, waiting, or recovering from disappointment, now suddenly wide and unfamiliar. You may have peace and still miss the noise. You may have clarity and still grieve the dream. You may have made the right decision and still feel the weight of what it cost. This is where many women begin to question themselves. Did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh? What if I end up alone? What if those were my best years? What if no one ever loves me again in a way that feels real? What if I left too late? What if I am too tired to begin again? Let those questions rise without letting them rule you. Fear is not always prophecy. Sometimes fear is simply the voice of a heart standing in unfamiliar freedom. Soft pause. And freedom can feel frightening when captivity was familiar. If you spent months or years organizing your emotions around someone else's inconsistency, then life without that emotional storm may feel strangely empty. Your mind may look for something to solve. Your body may look for something to brace against. Your heart may look for the old ache because at least the ache had a name. But peace is not always immediately sweet. Sometimes peace feels like a quiet room after a long season of noise. At first you hear everything. Your loneliness, your memories, your regret, your anger, your fatigue, your unanswered questions, your fear of being a woman with years behind her and uncertainty ahead. But do not run from that quiet too quickly. Sometimes the quiet is not punishment. Sometimes it is the first safe room your soul has entered in years. It may feel empty because nothing is hurting you there. It may feel unfamiliar because no one is making you earn your place. It may feel lonely because you are no longer using emotional chaos to distract you from your own grief. But stay, not forever, in sadness. Just long enough to hear yourself again. Pause. A woman over 30 does not fear starting over in a shallow way. She is not only worried about dating again, she is thinking about time, years, and edge. Her body, her responsibilities, her children perhaps, her family, her home, her finances, her trust, her face in the mirror, the future she once imagined arriving by now. She may look at younger women and feel a grief she does not want to admit. Not jealousy, not bitterness, just the ache of thinking, I gave so much of myself to a life that did not hold me carefully. That grief deserves respect because losing years is not the same as losing a few months of romance. Losing years can feel like losing versions of yourself. The woman you were at the beginning. The woman who believed more easily. The woman who laughed without checking the emotional weather first. The woman who thought loyalty would be enough to build a home. The woman who did not yet know how much love could cost when it was not returned with care. You may grieve her. You may miss her. You may even feel angry at her. But please do not abandon her now. She already carried enough. Soft pause. Ask yourself gently, can I grieve the years without declaring the rest of my life ruined? That question matters, because heartbreak has a way of making the future look smaller than it is. Pain can make one chapter feel like the whole book. It can make one person's failure feel like the final verdict on your capacity to be loved. It can make the time you lost feel larger than the time still waiting to be lived. But your life is not over because someone failed to meet you with maturity. Your beauty is not expired because you were hurt. Your tenderness is not wasted because it was mishandled. Your future did not disappear simply because one dream collapsed. There are women who begin again quietly, not with dramatic announcements, not with perfect confidence, not because they are untouched by pain, but because something in them finally understands that grief can sit beside hope without destroying it. A heart can be sad and still alive. A woman can be tired and still becoming. A season can be painful and still not be the end. Pause. Maybe your life will not look exactly like the life you imagined. That can hurt. Let it hurt. There is no need to pretend. Maybe the family dream changed. Maybe the home you hoped for did not become what you needed. Maybe the timing of everything feels unfair. Maybe you are carrying decisions you wish you had made sooner. Maybe you are mourning chances you cannot get back. This grief is real, but grief does not have to become a grave for your future. It can become ground, dark ground, heavy ground, soil that has known storms, but soil still, and something can grow there. Not the same thing as before. Maybe something wiser, something more rooted, something less dependent on being chosen by someone who does not know how to choose with integrity. Something that belongs to you. Soft pause. There is a stage in healing where a woman must stop asking life to return her to who she was before the pain. That woman may not be coming back in the same form, and perhaps she should not have to, not because she was wrong, but because she deserved to become someone who knows how to protect what is sacred in her. Maybe the woman before the pain was generous, but unguarded. Maybe she was loyal, but too willing to silence herself. Maybe she was patient, but not always honest about the cost. Maybe she believed love meant staying available even when she was being emotionally depleted. Maybe she thought endurance was the highest proof of devotion. Now she is learning something deeper. Love matters, but so does peace. Loyalty matters, but so does truth. Forgiveness matters, but so does safety. Tenderness matters, but so does the woman carrying it. That is not becoming less loving. That is becoming whole. Pause. And wholeness may feel strange at first, because when you have been divided for a long time, being whole can feel like loss. You may be used to leaving part of yourself behind in order to be acceptable, leaving your voice behind, leaving your standards behind, leaving your anger behind, leaving your intuition behind, leaving your needs behind, leaving your dreams behind. So when you begin gathering those parts, you may feel heavier before you feel free, because now you are carrying yourself again. All of yourself, not just the pleasant parts, not just the easy parts, not just the forgiving parts, but the disappointed woman, the angry woman, the tired woman, the woman who wants more, the woman who refuses to pretend, the woman who is no longer willing to smile while her spirit is being diminished. Welcome her. She is not here to ruin your softness. She is here to make your softness safe. Soft pause. This is where the fear of being alone often rises. Not simple loneliness, a deeper fear. The fear that if you stop accepting almost love, there may be no love left. The fear that standards will leave you isolated. The fear that your age, your history, your responsibilities, your wounds, your body, your exhaustion, or your past will make you difficult to choose. But listen closely. Being difficult to use is not the same as being difficult to love. Being clear is not the same as being cold. Having boundaries is not the same as being unavailable. Needing consistency is not asking too much. Wanting emotional maturity is not being unrealistic. And being a grown woman with a history does not make you less worthy of tenderness. It means the tenderness must be real enough to honor the life you have lived. You do not need a love that plays with your nervous system. You do not need a love that makes you feel 17 again in all the frightened ways. You need a love that can sit with truth, a love that can speak clearly, a love that can repair, a love that does not disappear when the conversation becomes honest, a love that does not require you to perform being low maintenance while your heart is starving. And until that kind of love is present, solitude is not failure. Sometimes solitude is protection. Sometimes solitude is restoration. Sometimes solitude is the room where your soul stops shaking. Pausa. There is a difference between being alone and being abandoned. Being abandoned is when someone withdraws love, presence, honesty, or care while leaving you to carry the confusion. Being alone can be sacred. Being alone can be where you find out what you believe without someone else's mood interrupting you. Being alone can be where your body finally exhales. Being alone can be where your spirit remembers it has a voice. Being alone can be where you stop measuring your worth by whether someone chooses to return. You may not love solitude every day. That is all right. You do not have to romanticize it. Some nights will still ache. Some weekends will still feel long. Some memories will still knock without warning. But do not confuse the ache of healing with the proof that you should go back. Sometimes the ache is not calling you backward. Sometimes it is simply asking to be comforted. Comfort it. Do not obey it. Soft pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but it must be allowed to grow at the pace of truth, not pressure, not performance, not pretending you are suddenly empowered. Real healing may look slow. It may look like changing your routine one small piece at a time. It may look like learning how to enjoy your own evenings again. It may look like sitting with a cup of tea and not needing to check whether they have posted something. It may look like cooking one good meal for yourself without feeling like care is wasted if no one witnesses it. It may look like walking into a room and not scanning for rejection. It may look like resting before you collapse. It may look like admitting, I am not ready yet, without calling yourself broken. There is dignity in not rushing your own becoming. Flowers do not apologize for the time they take. They do not bloom because someone stands over them shouting, hurry. They bloom when the conditions become honest enough for life to rise. You are allowed to become slowly. Pausa. And yes, there may be regrets. Regret over what you tolerated. Regret over what you missed. Regret over the friendships you neglected while trying to make the relationship survive. Regret over the body signals you ignored. Regret over the years you gave to someone who kept giving you confusion. But regret can either become a whip or a teacher. Do not let it become a whip. A whip says, look what you did. Look how foolish you were. Look how much time you lost. A teacher says, now you know. Now you see. Now you will not abandon yourself the same way again. Let regret teach, then let it sit down. You do not owe the rest of your life to punishing yourself for what pain already took from you. Soft pause. Maybe this is the beginning of a new kind of loyalty. Loyalty to your peace, loyalty to your body, loyalty to your intuition, loyalty to the woman who needs rest, loyalty to the truth you once kept softening, loyalty to the future that still deserves your care, because the future may not arrive loudly. It may begin in small, almost invisible ways. A calendar with plans that belong to you. A room that feels lighter. A morning where the first thought is not them. A friend who makes you laugh from your stomach. A boundary that no longer feels cruel. A quiet evening that feels less like punishment and more like peace. A dream you had forgotten beginning to whisper again. Do not despise small beginnings. Small beginnings are often how wounded hearts learn to trust life again. Pause. There will come a day when you realize you are not waiting the same way. Maybe the ache is still there, but it is not leading you. Maybe the memory still exists, but it no longer owns the whole room. Maybe you can name what happened without collapsing under it. Maybe you can say their name without losing your breath. Maybe you can look at yourself with more compassion than shame. Maybe you can begin to believe that the woman who was hurt is not the only woman you will ever be. That day may not be today, but let the possibility stand near you. Do not push it away. You do not need to feel hopeful every moment to have a future. Sometimes hope is not a feeling. Sometimes hope is simply the choice not to let pain write the final sentence. Pause. And for the woman afraid that no one will ever choose her again, hear this clearly. The goal is not to be chosen by anyone. The goal is to be met by what is worthy of the woman you have become. Being chosen by someone who cannot honor you is not a rescue. It is another kind of exile. You do not need to be rescued from solitude by another person's attention. You need to be restored to yourself so deeply that attention without care no longer feels like a gift. That restoration changes everything. Because when you know what it cost you to abandon yourself, you become less willing to do it again. You become more patient with your loneliness, more careful with your access, more honest about red flags, more protective of your peace, more open to love that is steady, not theatrical, more available to joy that does not come with anxiety attached. That is not loss. That is growth. That is the kind of growth that makes a woman bloom differently. Not louder, not harder, deeper. Pause. Your future may still hold beauty. Not because life owes you a perfect ending. Not because pain magically becomes purpose. Not because every wound has a neat explanation, but because you are still here, because your heart, though bruised, has not stopped being capable of warmth, because your soul, though tired, still knows when something is true, because your life, though changed, still has rooms you have not entered yet, because the love you gave carelessly to someone else can now return as wisdom, protection, tenderness, and self-respect within you. A woman can lose the life she expected and still discover life has not finished speaking. A woman can mourn old years and still create new meaning. A woman can be disappointed in love and still become more loving toward herself. A woman can be hurt and still blossom again. But this time, her blossom may be less about being admired and more about being rooted. Rooted in truth, rooted in peace, rooted in the knowledge that she no longer has to beg for a place in anyone's uncertain heart. Rooted in the quiet authority of a woman who has finally stopped confusing endurance with love. Soft pause. So if you are standing in the lonely space after a boundary, do not call it emptiness too quickly. It may be clearing. It may be the room your future needs. It may be the silence where your own voice is learning to return. It may be the the first season where nothing is demanding that you betray yourself in order to belong. Stay tender. Stay honest. Stay close to yourself. Let the grief come. Let the fear speak. Let the regret teach. But do not let any of them become your master. You are not starting over from nothing. You are starting over with wisdom, with evidence, with a deeper ear for truth, with a body that has learned what uncertainty costs, with a heart that is still capable of love, but no longer willing to be used as a shelter for someone else's absence. That is not the end of your story. That is a woman beginning again with her soul finally included. Pause. And in the next part, we need to talk about the quiet rebirth, how a woman begins to trust herself again, how she recognizes real peace, and how the heart, after so much winter, slowly learns that blooming is still possible. There is a quiet rebirth that happens after heartbreak. It does not always look like joy at first. It may not come with laughter, new love, a new dress, a new home, or a sudden feeling that everything is behind you. Sometimes rebirth begins very softly. You wake up one morning and realize the pain is still there, but it is not sitting on your chest the same way. You drink your coffee, and for a few minutes, your mind does not run back to the old questions. You hear a song that once would have broken you, and although it still stings, it does not take your whole day. You look at your phone and feel the old urge to check, but this time you pause, and in that pause, something sacred happens. You choose yourself without making a speech. Pause. That is how self-trust returns. Not all at once. Not in one grand moment where you suddenly become fearless. Self-trust returns through small evidence. Each time you listen to your body instead of dismissing it. Each time you honor your discomfort instead of explaining it away. Each time you keep a promise to yourself when no one is watching. Each time you say, I know what I know, even if someone else refuses to agree. Each time you choose peace over the old hunger for reassurance. These moments may look ordinary, but to a woman who has spent years doubting herself, ordinary honesty can feel like a miracle, because betrayal does something painful to the inner life. It does not only make you question another person, it makes you question your own eyes. You begin wondering how you missed the signs, how you believed the words, how you softened the evidence, how you kept forgiving, how you stayed when your body was already whispering, this is not safe. And after that, trusting yourself again can feel frightening. You may think, what if I choose wrong again? What if I ignore the signs again? What if I mistake attention for love again? What if my heart cannot be trusted? But listen to this gently. Your heart was not wrong for loving. It simply needed your discernment to stand beside it. Soft pause. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is to stop abandoning wisdom when feeling becomes strong. A tender heart is not a dangerous thing. A tender heart without protection is what becomes vulnerable to harm. So now, as you rebuild, you do not need to punish your heart for having loved. You need to teach it that it no longer has to love alone. Your mind can come with it. Your body can come with it. Your boundaries can come with it. Your values can come with it. Your lived experience can come with it. Your quiet inner knowing can come with it. This is how a woman becomes whole in love again. Not by becoming suspicious of every kind gesture. Not by turning every person into a threat. Not by closing the windows of her soul forever. But by no longer leaving herself behind when affection appears. Because affection can be beautiful, but affection is not enough. A kind word is not enough. A warm message is not enough. A charming beginning is not enough. A tearful apology is not enough. A moment of tenderness is not enough. You are allowed to watch what follows. Pause. Real peace has a different rhythm. It does not make you perform. It does not punish you for asking honest questions. It does not make you feel guilty for having needs. It does not disappear every time vulnerability enters the room. It does not require you to become smaller, quieter, more convenient, less truthful, less alive. Real peace may not feel exciting to the part of you that became used to emotional storms. At first, steady love may feel unfamiliar. It may even feel too quiet, because your body may have confused intensity with intimacy for a long time. The anxious waiting, the sudden relief, the emotional highs after deep lows, the sweetness after distance, the apology after hurt, the brief closeness after fear. That cycle can feel powerful, but power is not always love. Sometimes it is uncertainty wearing perfume. Sometimes it is emotional hunger being briefly fed. Sometimes it is the nervous system mistaking relief for romance. So when peace comes, do not reject it just because it does not make you tremble. Peace may not arrive with a storm. Peace may arrive like morning light, gentle, consistent, unforced. There, soft pause. Ask yourself gently, does this connection make me feel more like myself or less like myself? That question can protect you. Not because any relationship will feel perfect, but because healthy love should not require self-disappearance. You may have disagreements. You may have fears. You may have old wounds rise. You may need to communicate, adjust, learn, and grow. But beneath all of that, there should be room for your personhood, room for your voice, room for your pace, room for your truth, room for your body to breathe. A connection that constantly makes you anxious, ashamed, confused, and hungry for basic reassurance may not be love asking you to try harder. It may be your soul asking you to pay attention. And this time, you can listen sooner. Not because you are afraid, because you are awake. Pause. This is the quiet rebirth. A woman begins to recognize that her intuition was not her enemy. Her body was not dramatic. Her tears were not weakness. Her anger was not ugliness. Her exhaustion was not laziness. Her desire for consistency was not neediness. Her longing to be chosen, clearly, was not asking too much. She begins to understand that many of the things she once apologized for were simply parts of herself asking to be honored. And when that understanding settles, something changes. She stops begging herself to be easier. She stops editing her humanity to keep someone comfortable. She stops using the language of love to cover the reality of neglect. She stops calling herself too sensitive when the truth is to see that she was deeply affected by repeated emotional harm. And she begins to speak inwardly with more steadiness. I am allowed to notice. I am allowed to ask. I am allowed to need consistency. I am allowed to leave a pattern that keeps injuring me. I am allowed to trust the evidence of my own life. This is not arrogance. This is restoration. Soft pause. There may still be days when the old wound speaks. It may speak when someone takes too long to reply. It may speak when plans change suddenly. It may speak when a tone feels distant. It may speak when affection feels inconsistent. It may speak when someone new is kind and your body does not know yet whether kindness can be trusted. Do not shame yourself for that. Healing does not mean you never get triggered. Healing means you learn to stay with yourself when the trigger comes. Instead of immediately blaming yourself, you pause. Instead of chasing reassurance from panic, you breathe. Instead of assuming abandonment, you ask what is actually happening. Instead of accusing your heart of being broken, you remember that it is learning. You may say to yourself, this feeling is old. This fear makes sense. I do not have to obey it immediately. I can gather information. I can communicate clearly. I can protect myself without punishing someone who has not harmed me. This is mature healing. It allows you to be careful without becoming closed. It allows you to be wise without becoming cruel. It allows you to honor your past without making every future person pay for it. Pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but blooming does not mean forgetting winter. Blooming means winter no longer has the final word. You may always remember what happened. There may always be certain places, dates, words, or songs that carry a faint tenderness or ache. That does not mean you are unhealed. Some experiences become part of the soul's weather, not storms anymore, but seasons you survived. You do not need to erase the past to be free from it. Freedom may simply mean that the past no longer tells you who you are. It no longer says you were not enough. It no longer says you are easy to leave. It no longer says your needs are too heavy. It no longer says love means waiting in uncertainty. It no longer says you must earn tenderness by enduring pain. Freedom begins when a new voice rises inside you and says, no, that was what happened to me. It is not the name of me. Soft pause. You are not the betrayal. You are not the abandonment. You are not the silence. You are not the unanswered message. You are not the woman who waited too long. You are not the apology that never came. You are not the years that hurt. You are the woman who lived through them and still has the courage to become. That matters. Because pain can make identity shrink. It can make you introduce yourself to yourself through what you survived. I am the woman who was left. I am the woman who was betrayed. I am the woman who wasted years. I am the woman who was not chosen. But healing asks for a fuller truth. You are also the woman who loved sincerely. The woman who kept going while wounded. The woman who learned. The woman who is telling the truth now. The woman who is gathering her life back in both hands. The woman whose heart can still open, but now with wisdom at the door. You are not only what broke, you are also what remained. Pause. There's a powerful moment when a woman stops asking, how could they do that to me? And begins asking, how do I care for myself now that it happened? The first question may be necessary for a while. It allows you to name the shock. It allows you to see the harm. It allows you to stop minimizing. But if you stay there forever, your healing remains tied to their behavior. The second question brings your power home. How do I care for myself now? Not someday. Not when they apologize. Not when the memories disappear. Not when you feel perfectly strong. Now, today, in this body, in this life, with this grief, with this wisdom, with these remaining dreams, how do you care for yourself now? Maybe you begin by telling the truth without dramatizing it. Maybe you stop reopening old wounds through digital searching. Maybe you make your home feel like a place where peace can live again. Maybe you let trusted people know you are not as okay as you have appeared. Maybe you stop making excuses for someone who never had to carry the emotional weight of their own choices. Maybe you allow yourself to want more without calling it selfish. Maybe you rest. Not because everything is solved, but because your nervous system has been working for years. Soft pause. Rest is not laziness after emotional survival. Rest is repair. A woman who has spent years managing uncertainty may feel guilty when she rests because anxiety kept her busy. Pain gave her something to solve. Confusion gave her something to analyze. Waiting gave her something to monitor. Now, when the cycle quiets, rest can feel almost irresponsible. But rest is part of the blossom. So let yourself have quiet without needing to earn it. Let yourself sleep without turning healing into another performance. Let yourself have slow mornings when possible. Let yourself sit in the sun. Let yourself breathe without building a plan around every feeling. Let yourself be a woman, not only a survivor. Because sometimes healing spaces become another place where women feel pressured to be impressive, to be strong quickly, to be healed beautifully, to turn pain into wisdom on a schedule, to speak about betrayal as if it no longer touches them. But you do not have to become inspiring before you are allowed to be honest. Some days healing may look graceful. Other days it may look like messy, crying, a quiet dinner, and going to bed early because the heart has had enough for one day. Both count. Pause. Do not rush to make your pain useful. Some wounds need to be held before they can teach. You do not have to explain why it happened. You do not have to turn every heartbreak into a lesson immediately. You do not have to make peace with someone else's carelessness in order to appear mature. You are allowed to say, "This hurt. I am still understanding what it took from me." That is honest. And honest grief is healthier than polished denial. Over time, the lesson will come, not as a slogan, not as a forced gratitude, but as a quiet knowing. You may begin to know that you will no longer ignore your body to preserve a fantasy. You may begin to know that love without consistency is not safe enough for your life. You may begin to know that someone can be deeply familiar and still not be good for your future. You may begin to know that you can forgive someone and still keep distance. You may begin to know that your peace is not a luxury. It is a home you must protect. That knowing becomes wisdom, and wisdom becomes soil. And in that soil, the heart grows differently. Soft pause. A woman blooming after heartbreak may look more ordinary than people expect. She may not announce that she is healed. She may simply stop explaining herself to people who do not listen. She may stop chasing conversations that leave her empty. She may start laughing again, not because everything is perfect, but because laughter finally finds a place to land. She may buy flowers for her own table. She may take herself seriously when something feels wrong. She may pray differently, not begging to be chosen, but asking for the strength to remain true to herself. She may speak less, but more honestly. She may give less access, but more presence. She may feel softer toward herself than she has in years. And one day she may realize that she is no longer waiting for the person who hurt her to become the author of her healing. That is a deep freedom, not loud, deep. Pause. There is a kind of beauty that returns after pain, not the untouched beauty of someone who has never been disappointed, a different beauty, the beauty of a woman who has stopped performing wellness, the beauty of a woman whose eyes have learned truth, the beauty of a woman who does not need to harden in order to be strong, the beauty of a woman who can say, "I was hurt," without letting the wound own her name. The beauty of a woman who no longer mistakes self-abandonment for love. The beauty of a woman who can sit in silence and not hear it as rejection. The beauty of a woman who has learned that her own company is not a punishment. This beauty is not for display. It is for living. It shows up in how she chooses, how she rests, how she refuses confusion, how she listens to herself sooner, how she lets tenderness remain but no longer leaves it unguarded. This is what it means to blossom again. Not to return to innocence, but to grow into wisdom without losing warmth. Soft pause. Maybe you are not there yet. Maybe you are still in the middle, still crying sometimes, still missing them. still replaying, still angry, still tired, still unsure how to trust life again. That is all right. A blossom is not less real because it begins underground. There are seasons when nothing visible is happening, but roots are working in the dark. You may be in that kind of season. Quiet work, hidden work, the work of not texting, the work of eating, the work of sleeping, the work of telling the truth, the work of no longer insulting yourself for what you survived, the work of letting grief move without letting it become your identity. Do not dismiss the hidden work. It is often where the strongest return begins. Pause. And perhaps today, the question is not, am I fully healed? Perhaps the better question is, am I becoming more honest with myself than I was before? Am I protecting my peace a little more than I used to? Am I listening to my body instead of forcing it to be quiet? Am I allowing the truth to matter more than the fantasy? Am I learning to comfort my loneliness without giving it control? Am I beginning to believe that my life still belongs to me? If the answer is even a small yes, then something is growing. Do not measure your healing only by whether you still feel pain. Measure it by whether you are betraying yourself less. That is powerful because a woman can still ache and be healing. She can still cry and be growing. She can still miss someone and be moving forward. She can still have tender memories and be choosing truth. She can still carry grief and be blossoming. Pause. Your heart is not blooming because it was never hurt. It is blooming because hurt did not destroy its capacity for life. And that is a holy kind of strength. The kind that does not need to prove anything. The kind that does not need to become bitter to be believed. The kind that stands quietly in the morning and says, I am still here. I am learning. I am not rushing. I am not returning to what broke my peace. I am allowed to become slowly. I am allowed to bloom again. Hold that close because the heart may not open all at once. It may open in small acts of trust. Trusting yourself to notice. Trusting yourself to leave. Trusting yourself to rest. Trusting yourself to love again only where love has room for your wholeness. Trusting yourself to stop turning absence into meaning. Trusting yourself to choose truth even when longing speaks beautifully. And when you can trust yourself like that, the future becomes less terrifying. Not because you can control everything, but because you know you will not abandon yourself again in the same way. That is where peace begins to have roots. Pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again. But this time, it may bloom with boundaries around it. It may bloom slower. It may bloom deeper. It may bloom with fewer illusions and more grace. It may bloom without needing to be picked by someone who does not know how to care for living things. It may bloom for its own life, for its own breath, for the woman who almost forgot she was worthy of gentleness, for the years still ahead, for the mornings not yet lived, for the laughter not yet returned, for the peace not yet fully known but already on its way in small quiet signs. And in the next part, we need to bring all of this home into forgiveness without self-betrayal, release without denial, and the final truth that your life can still become beautiful without pretending the pain never happened. Forgiveness does not mean you pretend it did not hurt. It does not mean you call abandonment a lesson before you have had time to grieve it. It does not mean you excuse the silence, decorate the betrayal, or make a gentle story out of someone else's carelessness with your heart. Forgiveness, when it is real, does not ask a woman to betray herself one more time. It does not require her to smile at what broke her. It does not require her to reopen the door. It does not require her to carry the relationship's pain alone while calling it grace. Sometimes forgiveness begins much more quietly. It begins when you stop letting the wound be the only voice in the room. Pause. Maybe you are not ready to forgive in the way people expect. Maybe that word still feels too clean for something that was so messy. Maybe you hear it and feel pressure. Pressure to be peaceful. Pressure to be mature. Pressure to rise above. Pressure to stop talking about it. Pressure to make other people comfortable with a pain they did not have to live through. But healing does not need to be rushed into language it has not yet earned. You are allowed to say, I am still grieving. You are allowed to say, I am still understanding what happened to me. You are allowed to say, I do not want revenge, but I am not ready to pretend this did not change me. That is honest. And honesty is often holier than performance because many women were taught to forgive before they were allowed to feel. They were taught to be graceful before they were allowed to be angry. They were taught to keep the peace before they were allowed to name the harm. They were taught to understand everyone else's pain before anyone asked what pain they were carrying. So let this be said clearly. You do not have to erase the truth in order to heal beautifully. You do not have to minimize the wound in order to become free. You do not have to protect someone else's image at the expense of your own reality. Forgiveness without truth becomes another form of silence. And you have already been silent enough. Soft pause. There is a deeper kind of release. It is not denial. It is not forgetting. It is not saying it was fine. It is saying it was not fine and I will not let it keep governing the rest of my life. It is saying what happened mattered, but it will not become the only thing that matters. It is saying I can acknowledge the damage without building my identity around being damaged. It is saying I can stop carrying the expectation that they must become different before I can become whole. That kind of release is not soft because the wound was small. It is soft because you have decided your soul deserves rest. Pause. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again, but it blossoms differently when it has learned the difference between release and return. Release does not always mean you return to the person. Sometimes release means you stop returning to the mental room where you are still trying to win the argument. You stop replaying the conversation where you finally say the perfect sentence. You stop imagining the apology with the exact words your heart has been waiting for. You stop rehearsing how they will one day understand. You stop making your peace dependent on a version of them that may never exist. Release may look like closing the door gently, not because nothing happened, but because everything that happened has already taken enough. It may look like whispering to yourself, I cannot keep spending today trying to repair yesterday with someone who would not meet me in truth. That sentence may hurt, but it may also set something down. Soft pause. Ask yourself gently, what part of me is still waiting for them to become someone who could finally understand what they did? That part of you deserves compassion. Maybe she is young. Maybe she is tired. Maybe she is still sitting in the beginning, remembering when love felt possible. Maybe she still believes that if they understood the pain, then the years would not feel so wasted. Maybe she thinks an apology would give her dignity back. But your dignity was never in their hands. They may have failed to honor it. They may have failed to see it. They may have failed to treat it as sacred, but they did not create it. And because they did not create it, they cannot be the final authority over it. Your dignity is not waiting inside their regret. It is waiting inside your return. It is waiting every time you tell the truth without begging someone to agree. Every time you protect your peace without turning hard. Every time you choose not to shrink your needs into silence. Every time you remember that being hurt does not make you less worthy of love. Pause. There may still be sadness. Let it be there. There may still be anger. Let it speak. then guide it toward truth, there may still be longing. Hold it gently, but do not let it lead you back into harm. There may still be regret. Let it teach, but do not let it become a whip. There may still be love. Yes, even love, because sometimes the heart does not stop loving simply because the mind sees clearly, but love can change shape. It can stop reaching. It can stop pleading. It can stop making excuses. It can become a quiet blessing from a distance. It can become a memory that no longer demands access to your life. It can become wisdom. And maybe that is one of the most mature forms of healing, not hating someone in order to leave them, not needing them to be a monster in order to admit they were not safe, not denying the beautiful moments in order to respect the harmful pattern, not destroying your tenderness in order to protect yourself. You can say, I loved them, and you can say, I cannot return. Both can be true. That is emotional adulthood. That is clarity with compassion still breathing. Soft pause. Some grief comes not from losing love, but from seeing clearly what love never was. That is a hard sentence, because when clarity arrives, it may not comfort you immediately. It may first undo the story you survived on. You may look back and realize you called inconsistency passion. You called emotional distance stress. You called crumbs hope. You called waiting loyalty. You called silence complexity. You called self-abandonment patience. And then the grief becomes sharp, not only because they failed you, but because you can finally see how long you were hungry while sitting at a table you kept setting for two. Pausa. Do not punish yourself for that. The woman who waited was not stupid. She was trying to keep love alive with the tools she had. She was trying to make sense of mixed signals. She was trying to protect a dream. She was trying to believe the good moments meant more than the painful pattern. She was trying to survive disappointment without becoming bitter. She needs your mercy now, not your contempt. Speak to her softly. Tell her, you were doing the best you could with a heart that did not want to give up too soon. You stayed longer than you wish, but now you are learning. You gave love sincerely, and sincerity is not shameful. You will not use your own past against yourself anymore. That is how a woman begins to gather herself, not by rejecting the woman who stayed, but by embracing her and leading her forward. Soft pause. You cannot bloom while hating the version of yourself who survived the winter. She is part of you. She carried you here. She may have made choices you would not make now, but she was living inside the pain with less clarity than you have today. Honor her, then teach her. Show her that love can be tender without being blind. Show her that loyalty must include the self. Show her that peace is not too much to ask. Show her that silence is not something she has to keep translating. Show her that her body's warning signs matter. Show her that no relationship is worth becoming a stranger to herself. And slowly she will trust you. The woman you were will begin to trust the woman you are becoming. That is self-trust returning through compassion. Pausa. Maybe you thought blossoming again meant becoming joyful quickly, but perhaps blossoming is quieter than that. Perhaps it begins when you no longer wake up trying to measure your value through someone else's absence. Perhaps it begins when you stop checking whether they noticed your silence. Perhaps it begins when you can feel lonely without making loneliness your master. Perhaps it begins when you no longer confuse being contacted with being cherished. Perhaps it begins when you finally let yourself rest from trying to make an unavailable person emotionally present. That rest is sacred because emotional survival can become a full-time occupation. Always reading between the lines, always adjusting your tone, always preparing for distance, always wondering what changed, always trying to remain lovable in the eyes of someone who could not remain consistent. And when you stop, your soul may feel tired in a way you cannot explain. Let it be tired. Do not demand immediate radiance from a heart that has been fighting invisible battles. Let healing begin with rest. Let peace begin as quiet. Let joy return without being forced. Let your life become gentle again in small ways. Pause. There is still beauty ahead of you. Not the innocent beauty of never being hurt. A deeper beauty. Beauty with discernment. Beauty with boundaries. Beauty with calm in the eyes. Beauty that no longer needs to be chosen by the wrong person in order to feel real. Beauty that can sit alone and not call itself abandoned. Beauty that can love again someday without handing over its entire self at the first sign of warmth. Beauty that knows the difference between a door and a trap. Beauty that understands a person can desire you and still not be safe for you. A person can miss you and still not be ready to honor you. A person can apologize and still not be willing to change. A person can have pain and still be responsible for the pain they caused. This wisdom does not make you cold. It makes you rooted. And a rooted woman does not have to chase every passing season. She knows what kind of soil her soul needs. Soft pause. Maybe love will come again one day. Maybe it will not arrive in the form you expected. Maybe it will begin with friendship, quiet respect, consistent kindness, honest communication, or a peace your younger self might have mistaken for boredom. Maybe it will come after you have learned to enjoy your own life again. Maybe it will come when you are no longer asking love to rescue you from the emptiness another person left behind. But whether love comes soon, later, or differently than you imagined, your life is still worthy now. Not when someone chooses you. Now, not when someone regrets losing you. Now, not when someone finally understands what they did. Now, not when you are fully healed, perfectly confident, or no longer triggered. Now, your life is not on hold until another person recognizes your value. Your life is already asking you to return. Pause. Return to the morning. Return to the body. Return to the breath. Return to the friendships that feel clean. Return to music. Return to prayer. If prayer still feels like home, return to silence. That is not punishment, but sanctuary. Return to meals that nourish you. Return to rooms you can make peaceful. Return to dreams that were buried under emotional survival. Return to the parts of yourself you postponed while trying to be loved. A woman blossoms again by returning. Again and again, not perfectly, not without tears, but faithfully. She returns after the memory. She returns after the trigger. She returns after the lonely night. She returns after the moment she almost reached out. She returns after the day she felt weak. She returns because now she understands that healing is not never leaving herself. Healing is noticing sooner and coming back with mercy. Soft pause. There will be days when your heart still aches. But one day the ache will no longer feel like a command. There will be memories. But one day, memory will no longer rewrite the truth. There will be loneliness. But one day, loneliness will no longer be strong enough to send you back into confusion. There will be tenderness. But one day, tenderness will know how to stand behind a boundary. There will be love inside you. But one day, love will no longer mean disappearing. That day may come slowly, but it can come. And when it does, you may not announce it. You may simply notice that you are breathing easier. You may notice that your life feels like it has more space. You may notice that you are no longer rehearsing pain as often. You may notice that the woman in the mirror looks tired, yes, but also present. Present. That is a beautiful word after abandonment. present with herself, present with truth, present with her own body, present with the life that remains, present enough to say, I am not finished. Pause. You are not finished. The betrayal did not finish you. The silence did not finish you. The years did not finish you. The humiliation did not finish you. The nights you cried quietly did not finish you. The love that did not choose you carefully did not finish you. You are still here. And being here is not a small thing. It means something and you kept breathing even when hope felt thin. It means some root remained alive under the frost. It means the woman inside you was not destroyed. She was buried for a while, but buried is not the same as dead. Sometimes what is buried is waiting for the right season to rise. Soft pause. So let this be the truth you carry forward. A heart that has been hurt can still blossom again. Not because the pain was small, not because the past was fair, not because the person who harmed you finally became accountable, not because you never missed them, not because you have no scars, but because your heart was made for more than one season, because your life is larger than the chapter that wounded you, because your tenderness can be protected, because your dignity can be rebuilt, because your body can learn safety again, because your soul can stop living in the doorway of someone else's uncertainty, because you can grieve what was lost without surrendering what remains. And what remains is still sacred. Your breath, your wisdom, your softness, your discernment, your future, your capacity to love without abandoning yourself, your right to peace, your right to be met with clarity, your right to stop begging confusion to become love. Pause. Do not rush the blossom. Let it come honestly. Let it come through rest, through tears, through boundaries, through clean truth, through small mornings, through friendships that do not drain you, through forgiving yourself before you try to make sense of forgiving anyone else, through choosing peace in moments when longing still speaks, through learning that your heart can remain open without remaining exposed, through understanding that you are not less of a woman because someone failed to recognize the fullness of you. Let it come in its own season. And while it comes, live gently, speak to yourself with care. Stop calling yourself foolish for having hoped. Stop calling yourself weak for having stayed. Stop calling yourself broken because healing is taking time. You are not broken. You are becoming truthful after surviving confusion. You are becoming rooted after being shaken. You are becoming careful with what is sacred in you. You are becoming a woman who can say, I loved, I lost, I learned, I grieved, I returned. And I am still worthy of a life that feels peaceful in my own body. Soft pause. That is the final truth. You do not need to become hard to survive. You do not need to become bitter to be wise. You do not need to erase your past to begin again. You do not need to be chosen by the person who wounded you in order to be whole. You do not need their apology to start breathing. You do not need their regret to become valuable. You do not need their clarity to trust your own. You are allowed to heal without permission. You are allowed to release without denial. You are allowed to forgive without returning. You are allowed to remember without reopening. You are allowed to blossom without explaining your season to anyone. And when the day comes that peace feels more familiar than pain, do not be afraid of it. Let it stay. Let it teach your body a new language. Let it show you that love should not always feel like bracing. Let it remind you that your life can still become beautiful in ordinary, steady, honest ways. A quiet home, a calm morning, A clean boundary. A laugh that returns from somewhere deep. A heart that does not need to chase. A woman who no longer abandons herself to be loved. That is blossoming, not perfect, not untouched, but alive. And after every